Chapter 1338. The Destruction of the Vishnu Palace, one of the three great palaces of Sanskrit by Chu Xiu, mainly alarmed those who had relations with Chu Xiu, of course, mainly because they had enmity with him. As for those who didn't have a grudge against him, they were also secretly investigating and being vigilant. The Daluotian people were already in such chaos before the era of great strife had even arrived. What would the Daluotian people be like when the era of great strife really arrived? At this moment, in the extreme north, in the Pillar of Heaven's mountains, the stargazing pavilion, was the secluded cultivation ground of Xing He's loose cultivator. Meng Xinghe sat at the highest point of the stargazing pavilion. There was a chessboard in front of him, but there was no opponent. He was actually playing against himself. At this time, a white-robed warrior walked to the stargazing pavilion, lowered his head and said in a deep voice, "Your Excellency, the result of the war in the western region has come out. Vishnu Palace, one of the three main palaces of Sanskrit, has been destroyed, but the real person who did it was not Tianluo Buddha, but Chu Xiu. I don't know when he joined hands with the treasure temple of Heavenly Luo. They took a detour around the 100,000 mountains and launched a sneak attack when the treasure temple of Heavenly Luo attracted the attention of the Brahmin sect." Meng Xinghe paused for a moment and put down a chess piece. He still had that gentle smile on his face. Interesting. The Heavenly Luo temple, which has always been open and above board, actually teamed up with Chu Xiu, who has a bad reputation. And the Sanskrit sect, which has always liked to use sinister means, actually fell into such a terrible trap. Interesting. That martial artist said in a low voice, "Lord, with such a thing happening, I'm afraid the pugilistic world will be shaken for a while. Will our Galaxy Martial Academy's plan be carried out normally?" Meng Xinghe waved his hand and said, "There's no need to delay. Even if Chu Xiu exterminated the Sanskrit religion, the Starry River Martial Institute still needs to be established. How many prime sovereigns have agreed so far?" The martial artist's expression was somewhat ugly as he said, "Only 3 people agreed. They didn't know how to appreciate favors. My lord, you're willing to lead them to establish the Starry River Martial Academy to give our Guzun lineage a chance of survival and fortune in this era of great battles. In the end, they are still worried about their own little thoughts. I don't think many of them will be able to pass on to the next generation. They will all be cut off." Meng Xinghe smiled and waved his hand. "Everyone has their own fate. We naturally can't force them if they don't want to. They will understand my painstaking efforts. There is no need for them to make a choice now. Just carry out the plan as usual." The martial artist walked down and Meng Xinghe looked up at the sky. This was the highest mountain peak in the extreme north, and it could be said to be the closest place to heaven and earth. Martial immortals. Martial immortals. Martial immortals. Although they were known as immortals, they were still mortals. Mortals that would grow old, fall sick, and die. They were mortals that were trapped in this world. In the Milky Way above the 9 heavens were there really immortals who could not die. Southern barbarian land. After Chu Xiu returned with his men, he immediately started to count the spoils. The commotion in the Jianghu had nothing to do with him anymore. In any case, he had achieved his goal. As for the Brahmin sect, they were definitely going to suffer. In the absence of the sect master, the Brahmin sect was originally unwilling to make a move. Now that the Vishnu temple was destroyed by Chu Xiu, it was even more impossible for the Brahmin sect to make a move. Otherwise, the Heavenly Luo Pagoda would teach the Brahmin sect a lesson and let them know that it was necessary to use thunderous means to destroy the heretics. Moreover, after he destroyed one of the Brahmin sect's temples, it would also serve as a deterrent. Therefore, whether it was the people of the Southern Territory or the group of prime venerables, they would probably not cause trouble for him during this period of time. This would give Chu Xiu a period of stable development. The first thing Chu Xiu did was to take out the various records of the Brahmin sect about the origin and prepare to study it first. Although he did not get the origin, at least he knew where it was. According to Ji Xinlua, these records of the Brahmin sect were studied at the cost of the lives of several martial immortals and countless Brahmin sect experts. As long as he could borrow a trace of the origin, Chu Xiu's strength would skyrocket. But when he opened the records, Chu Xiu found that he could not understand them. The Brahmin sect's records were naturally written in those obscure Sanskrit. Fortunately, Chu Xiu brought Ji Xinlua back. After asking someone to call Ji Xinlua still had a nervous expression on his face. He did not know whether Chu Xiu would kill him to silence him or not. But he did not expect that the first thing Chu Xiu called him to do was to ask him to be a translator. After throwing the records to Ji Xinlua, Chu Xiu asked, "How much do you know about the creation divine artifact of your Brahmin sect?" Ji Xinlua shook his head cautiously and said, "Almost nothing. I stepped into the mysterious heaven and earth realm less than a year ago and took over the position of the palace master of the Illusion Sky Palace. Therefore, I know nothing about the secrets of the Brahmin sect. Moreover, although most of the palaces of the Vishnu Palace are not the main fighting palaces, the Illusion Sky Palace is one of the main fighting palaces of the Vishnu Palace. Almost all the previous palace masters did not participate in the research of this thing. Chu Xiu nodded and did not continue to ask. He just asked Ji Xinlua to translate these records. He was not afraid that Ji Xinlua would deliberately do something. One reason was that the other party was scared out of his wits and did not dare to do so. The second reason was that Chu Xiu's realm was much higher than Ji Xinlua's. If the other party deliberately did something, even if Chu Xiu did not understand this thing, he would still be able to see it. After Ji Xinlua finished translating these things, Chu Xiu also asked Ji Xinlua to translate all the ancient books he got from the Brahmin sect. Among them, there were some cultivation methods that his subordinates could use as reference if they wanted to practice. In the secret room, Chu Xiu looked through the records left by the Brahmin sect. He suddenly realized that he had underestimated these Daluotian sections. He assumed that the sects from the absolute celestial plane did not have much understanding towards the essence. However, the truth was that back in the lower realm, the sects from the absolute celestial plane had already noticed the existence of the essence. Their understanding towards the essence was definitely much greater than Dugu Weiwa's. At the very least, it was much greater than Dugu Weiwa back in the lower realm. However, at that time, most of the absolute celestial experts only had a smattering of knowledge about the existence of essence. All they knew was that essence contained extremely great power, which was why they sealed it in the formation. After entering the Daluotian world, the Brahmin sect and the heavenly Luo Buddha began to compete for the origin. When the Brahmin sect officially got the origin, although it was sealed by the heavenly Luo Buddha, after all, it fell into their hands so they could study it carefully. According to the records of the Brahmin sect, the existence of the origin was actually the heaven and earth itself. In the end, any top martial arts sect would evolve the martial way into the heavenly way, and the Brahmin sect was no exception. In the eyes of the Brahmin sect, the beginning of the world was chaos, divided into yin and yang. And this origin was a kind of imprint left behind after the creation of a world. It was formed by the two original forces left in the chaos at the beginning of the world. Therefore, the origin was a form of the heaven and earth itself, and the Brahmin sect called it the divine creation object, which was very appropriate. After so many years of research and experiments, the Brahmin sect finally came to a conclusion after paying the price of countless lives. The origin could not be refined, nor could it be controlled, and it was not even possible to borrow a trace of its power. There was only one way to use the power of the origin, and that was to find a way to get closer to the heaven and earth and comprehend the power of the origin itself. Only then could one passively stimulate the power of the origin and cause it to erupt with power. That was the power that was released inadvertently, just like the power that was released when the two origin fused in Chu Xiu's body. It was simply impossible to control. However, the Sanskrit sect had created a secret method to adjust one's own power. In an instant, one's power could be adjusted to an extreme yin or extreme yang state. This way, one could withstand a portion of the origin power. At least it could slightly affect the power of the origin, and not simply cause it to erupt and then use it to commit suicide. However, the Brahmin sect had not experimented with this method. Because the origin of the Brahmin sect was sealed by the heavenly Luo treasure Buddha, so they did not dare to touch it. If they moved lightly, they would not be able to break the seal on the origin, but if they moved heavily, it would cause the power of the origin to erupt violently, and that power would be enough to destroy the entire Vishnu Palace. Therefore, the warriors of the Vishnu Palace completely relied on their own deduction to create this secret method, but they never had the opportunity to use it, so they did not know whether it was useful or not. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes. He suddenly wanted to give it a try. It was not that Chu Xiu was courting death, but recently his troubles were almost solved, at least temporarily. Moreover, this was the stronghold of the southern barbaric land, where Chu Xiu's situation was the safest. This kind of environment could tolerate Chu Xiu's courting death, to a certain extent. Previously, when fighting against Yindra, Chu Xiu had a deep understanding of the power of the creation demonic path. The creation demonic path was a power that could directly reach the power of the demonic path, the cycle of life and death, destruction to the extreme, new life. Without destruction, how could there be a new life? Boundless demonic energy lingered around Chu Xiu, turning into the extremely gloomy primitive devil cave. This was the darkest place in the world, the birthplace of the demonic path. But in the deepest part of the primitive devil cave, there was a little light shining, a glimmer of light in the darkness, very dazzling. In the glimmer of light, a green sprout rose tenaciously, representing vitality, representing creation. In the past, when he killed Iin Tualuo, it was this seemingly inconspicuous sprout, but it was the manifestation of the demonic path of creation that had evolved to the extreme. It had even caused the source of yin and yang to tremble, even though it was only a trace. And now, Chu Xiu deliberately made the yin and yang origin in his body shake more than last time. Although it was only a trace, the power was several times more than last time. But the next moment, Chu Xiu's face suddenly changed. He immediately stopped stimulating the yin and yang origin, and began to run the secret method of Sanskrit. In an instant, his figure suddenly turned into a strange state where half of it was as black as ink, and the other half was shrouded in a hot golden light. Two forces surged back and forth in Chu Xiu's body, as if they wanted to break free from the shackles of his body. In the end, Chu Xiu suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood, and the demonic energy and golden light around him faded away. His whole face was pale as if he was hollowed out. The attempt failed, but the courting death succeeded. Chapter 1339. The Sanskrit sect was right about one thing. Source energy was something that humans could not control. Although the ripples created by the passive fusion of the source energies of yin and yang had allowed Chu Xiu to break through a level of martial immortal, it had also seriously injured his physical body. This time around, Chu Xiu was even more daring to take the initiative to activate the source energy of yin and yang. Although it was only a tiny bit of the source energy, it was not something that the current Chu Xiu could withstand. As for the secret technique researched by the Sanskrit sect, it was able to change one's physical attributes to allow one to carry the source energy. While it was still somewhat useful, it was only somewhat. The prerequisite was that one's own power had to be strong enough. Otherwise, even if one possessed the extreme yang body or the extreme yin body, it would still be useless. Chu Xiu took a deep breath and swallowed a bunch of medicinal pellets. He decided not to touch that thing for the time being. Although the source energy was very strong, so strong that it was unimaginably strong, and if Chu Xiu could borrow a trace of its power would be comparable to a top-notch divine ability, or even surpass the clear sky illuminating image. Unfortunately, it was not a power that belonged to a human. It would appear that the Sanskrit sect was not spouting nonsense for the sake of researching that source energy. Right at that moment, Ji Xinlua suddenly knocked on the door and walked in. Carefully, he said, "My lord, I found something that might be useful to you." "What is it?" Ji Xinlua took out a few pieces of paper and said, "These are some secrets that the old hall master discovered when he was still alive. He had discussed and researched them with the church master and the other two hall masters. Later on, the old hall master passed away. After Xan Jialua took over the position of hall master, he did not pay attention to these things. However, I feel that my lord will be interested in these things." The traitor Ji Xinlua was quite competent. He knew that the Sanskrit sect still had Ji Xinlua. This meant that he could not return. At the very least, he would not be able to return before the Sanskrit sect was destroyed. Thus, he could only try his best to find an opportunity to perform meritorious deeds in front of Chu Xiu. Only then would he be able to stand out. Sometimes, traitors had to be more loyal than their own people, and they had to put in more effort. Because they knew that they had no way out. If they didn't grasp everything before them, then they would really have no other way out. Chu Xiu took the paper and looked at it. The things written on it were quite novel because the things written on it were actually related to luck. Although the strength of the previous lord of Vishnu Palace was not as good as the other two lords, he was an extremely knowledgeable person, and had studied many things. Based on the great ancient tribulation and the evolution of the Dalu Ocean in the past 10,000 years, he discovered the existence of destiny. Heaven and earth had the cycle of the 4 seasons, and humans also had their own destiny. The Lord of Vishnu Palace believed that human beings were not special in this world. All living beings had to go through the cycle of life and death. Human beings also had to go through it, it was just that it would take a long time. The Great Ancient Tribulation was a cycle of karmic luck aimed at the human race, but it was not a dead end. Before the arrival of the Great Ancient Tribulation, there were already many signs such as meteorites falling from the sky, earth dragons turning over, and so on. As a result, at that time only a few sects such as Spiritual Treasure Temple chose to stand up and fight against the Great Ancient Tribulation with their own strength. The other sects chose to flee. The final result was needless to say. Those cultivators found the existence of the Dalu Ocean race and collectively fled to the Dalu Ocean race, giving up on the lower realm. If those cultivators did not leave at that time, but chose to abandon their sectarian views and unite to fight against the Great Ancient Tribulation together, then they were very likely to survive the great ancient tribulation while preserving half of their strength, and then usher in a new round of luck prosperity. Among them there was even a mention of Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. The Daluotian sects did not know much about Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji. They only knew that they came from the lower realm. But according to the level of vitality they observed from the array in the Daluotian divine palace, the vitality in the lower realm was not rich. It was far inferior to that of the Daluotian race, and even inferior to the heavenly realm that had been destroyed 10,000 years ago. Therefore the existence of Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji itself was unreasonable. But here the old temple master of the Vishnu palace also gave an explanation. He guessed that when all the cultivators in the heavenly realm left, those who stayed in the lower realm were either ordinary people, some low-level cultivators, or those cultivators who were not valued by the sections. Therefore the inheritance they received was actually incomplete, and their strength was weaker than under normal circumstances. But the luck belonged to the entire human race and it would not change. Because most of the experts and geniuses in the heavenly realm left, the luck of the heavenly realm was not evenly distributed, resulting in all of it gathering in one or two people, infinitely increasing their strength. This was also possible. At present, 10,000 years had passed in the Daluotian race. Many cultivators could already feel the changes in the Daluotian race. For example, the vitality in secret realms and other places was declining faster and faster, and so on. The luck of the Daluotian race might also decline from prosperity. If they did not want to return to the heavenly realm in the past, then the best way was to unite the scattered luck into one, and jointly resist the disaster of the decline of luck. But unfortunately, in the end, the old temple master's suggestion was not accepted by the cult leader of Brahma Palace, and at the same time, it was also ridiculed by the temple masters of Brahma Palace and Shiva Palace. The sudden death of the old temple master of the Vishnu Palace also had something to do with the fact that he had spent a lot of effort to study this matter. But when Chu Xiu saw the suggestion of the old temple master of the Vishnu Palace to the cult leader of Brahma Palace, he felt that it was normal. If he was the cult leader of Brahma Palace, he would also not agree to the suggestion of the old temple master of the Vishnu Palace. The old temple master actually wanted Brahma Palace and Heavenly Jewel Buddha to give up the old prejudice and join hands to completely control the western region. Then, with the western region as the foundation, they would annex the southern region and the eastern region, and finally join hands with the Tao sect to gather the power of Tao and Buddha to overcome the luck tribulation. Not to mention that the luck tribulation was just the old temple master's speculation for the time being. Even if it was true, it was like a fantasy to want Brahma Palace to give up the old resentment and join hands with Heavenly Jewel Buddha. In other words, even if Brahma Palace agreed, Heavenly Jewel Buddha might not necessarily agree. This matter was kept in mind by Chu Xiu. Although he could not completely believe everything that the old temple master of the Vishnu Palace had deduced, what he said was not far from the truth, especially his inference about the lower realm, although he had never been to the lower realm. Luck, if the rise of Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji itself represented the gathering of the luck of the lower realm, then where was Chu Xiu's luck? Luck was something that could not be seen or touched, it only existed in other people's guesses. Moreover, if it was said that Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji could reach this step only because of the illusory luck, Chu Xiu would certainly not believe it. Perhaps they were able to reach the peak because of luck, but it was not because luck chose them but because luck could only choose them. Because in the lower realm at that time, only Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji could reach the peak, and only they were qualified to touch the illusory luck. Ji Xinlua was still watching carefully on the side. Chu Xiu waved his hand at him and said, "The things you brought are very useful, don't worry, I Chu Xiu will not mistreat people who work hard. But because of your current special identity, you can't go out and show your face for the time being. When Brahma Palace is destroyed, the position you can get will be even higher than that of a palace master of the Vishnu Palace." Ji Xinlua thanked Chu Xiu profusely and left, but in his heart he did not agree with Chu Xiu's words. He admitted that Chu Xiu was indeed very strong, but now he was under Chu Xiu's command only to save his life. He did not believe that Chu Xiu could destroy Brahma Palace. He was the palace master of Brahma Palace. No matter what, he was also regarded as a quasi-high-level person of Brahma Palace. Because of this, he knew the horror of Brahma Palace. Chu Xiu could destroy a palace of Brahma Palace with a sneak attack, but he did not believe that Brahma Palace, which had been passed down for more than 10,000 years, could be destroyed by Chu Xiu. After Ji Xinlua left, Chu Xiu also began to recuperate in seclusion. The impact of the yin and yang origin had caused a lot of damage to Chu Xiu's physical body. Even if his physical body was extremely strong now, the last power of the yin and yang origin was not something that Chu Xiu could withstand. After more than a month, Chu Xiu came out of seclusion and called Mei Qinglian to ask if there was any situation in the western region. Mei Qinglian shook her head and said, "There is no movement in the western region. According to the information that Fatty Sikong Tan sent, Brahma Palace in the western region has lost a palace, can be said to be a heavy loss. Moreover, there is no news of the return of the world venerate, so Brahma Palace can only be vigilant and do not make any move. As for Heaven Luo Treasure Rakshasa, they did not do anything other than keeping an eye on Brahma Palace, as if they are ready to stop while they are ahead, and do not intend to fight Brahma Palace to the end." Chu Xiu nodded his head. This was similar to what he had guessed before. With this kind of reaction, Brahma Palace should not be looking for trouble with him. But at this time, Mei Qinglian suddenly said, "Although there is nothing in the western region, there is something in the northern region, you should pay attention to it." "What is it?" "You should know Xinghe Lu's cultivator, the one who has a good relationship with Yi Weikong. While you were in seclusion, Xinghe Lu's cultivator teamed up with 3 other prime venerates to build the stargazing martial courtyard in the northern heavenly pillar mountain. All prime venerates' disciples of major sects, and rogue cultivators are allowed to come and cultivate there, regardless of origin or sect. As long as you do not have a master, you can come and go as you please. You can come and go as you please. You are free to come and go as you please." After saying that, Mei Qinglian frowned and said, "That guy must be crazy. What's the difference between him doing this and giving away cultivation methods and experience points for free? The other Daluotian experts only talk about martial Dao, but he took out core cultivation methods to explain. This is crazy." Hearing Mei Qinglian's words, a word suddenly popped up in Chu Xiu's mind. Providence. Exhaling deeply, Chu Xiu's eyes flickered with an indecipherable light. A peak 9th heaven martial immortal expert will not go crazy, let alone suffer a loss. I'm afraid he is fighting for Providence. Chapter 1340. During the ancient sovereign convention, Meng Xinghe had come to Chu Xiu and said some irrelevant things. At that time, Chu Xiu was still a little puzzled and did not know what Meng Xinghe meant. Now that he thought about the issue of providence, Chu Xiu could roughly guess what Meng Xinghe was planning. The key to providence lay in people. One person's providence could not compete with the whole world, but a group of people could. Although Gu Zun's lineage was strong, its only shortcoming was its small number of people. Therefore, when Meng Xinghe established the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy, he abandoned sectarian views. In fact, what he received was the providence of hundreds of families. Every warrior who came to the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy to cultivate, even if they belonged to other factions, still owed a portion of the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy's providence and karma. Mei Qinglian did not know what he meant. Chu Xiu directly said in a deep voice, "Call Old Wei and the others here. I have something to tell them." If the matter of providence was just the Lord of Vishnu Palace's own speculation, although Chu Xiu would remember this matter, he would not pay too much attention to it. But now, what Meng Xinghe was doing was directly related to the word providence. At least in Chu Xiu's opinion, it was not far from the truth. When everyone arrived, Chu Xiu told them about this matter, and everyone present had a thoughtful look on their faces. Qin Qingdi touched his head and said, "I say, is this kind of thing reliable? Why do I feel that it is very mysterious? I have fought with heaven and earth, fought with people, and finally reached this step with great difficulty. Can it be explained by the word providence?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Providence is the providence of this world, not for you alone. If a magic weapon falls from the sky and the strong see it, it is called providence. Even if the weak pick it up, they will be devoured by the weapon spirit. So, do you think this person has providence or no providence? Therefore, in my opinion, fate does exist. The actions of the Lord of Vishnu Palace and Meng Xinghe have proved that they have realized the existence of fate." At this moment, Lu Jianghe suddenly said, "I agree." Everyone turned to look at Lu Jianghe. Lu Jianghe had a rare look of contemplation on his face as he said, "Now that you mention it, I do recall something. Previously, when the sect master fought for hegemony in the pugilistic world and completely shook the world with the power of the Kunlun devil cult, he once said, 'The destiny of the devil Dao belongs to me.' Back then I flattered. I told the sect master that with the strength of our holy sect, let alone the providence of the fiend Dao, even the providence of the world would definitely be in our hands. But at that time, the sect master pointed to the east and said that half of it was still in Ning Xuanji's hands. At that time, I thought that the sect master was only talking about strength. But now, it seems that the providence he mentioned should mean the providence. Since these words came from Dugu Weiwei's mouth, Chu Xiu could actually verify it with Heavenly Soul. But Chu Xiu always had a trace of vigilance against Heavenly Soul, so he didn't intend to ask. Qin Qing Di rubbed his chin and said, "Even if the providence really exists, what does Meng Xinghe's establishment of the Star River Martial Academy have to do with us?" Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Of course it has to do with us. The providence is like a cake. If you take a bite, I will take a bite. In the 4 Daluotian regions, every top sect can take a bite of the cake. As for the parts that don't taste good, no one has taken a bite yet." Once Meng Xinghe's Star River Martial Academy was established, it would definitely attract those who were not wanted yet. Among the 4 regions, the Buddhist sect of the Western Domain and the Tao sect of the Northern Domain are deeply rooted. Only the people of the Southern Domain and Eastern Domain can be attracted to the Star River Martial Academy. I have been planning for the Eastern Domain for so long. How can the Star River Martial Academy meddle in the Eastern Domain? Among the 4 Daluotian regions, Chu Xiu had always stayed in the Eastern Domain, where he had the greatest reputation. Now that he had turned from enemies to friends with High Heaven sect and was a member of the Imperial Heaven Pavilion, he only had Cold River City as his enemy. Therefore, as long as the opportunity was right, the Eastern Domain could belong to Chu Xiu at some point in time. It would have been fine if he didn't know about the providence, but now that he knew, Chu Xiu wouldn't let anyone snatch something from him. Wei Shuya said in a deep voice, "So you are going to learn from Meng Xinghe?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "Meng Xinghe has his own path and I have mine. He is now the leader of the Prime Venerables, and there are several Prime Venerables around him. His reputation can be said to have shaken the Daluotian. When Meng Xinghe and Wu Yuan appeared, the entire 4 Daluotian regions were shaken. My current reputation is still inferior to Meng Xinghe's. Therefore, I just need to guard the Eastern Domain. As for the method, it's very simple. We have been in the Daluotian for so long and now is the time." Chu Xiu looked at the people present and said in a deep voice, "I have decided to leave the Imperial Heaven Pavilion and rebuild the holy cult in the Daluotian Eastern Domain. I will make the name of Kunlun resound throughout the Daluotian continent." No one objected to this suggestion. In fact, even Wei Shuya and the other elders of the Kunlun demon sect revealed looks of excitement in their eyes. In fact, for them in the past, as long as the Kunlun devil cult restored its former glory in the lower realm, they would be satisfied. But now, after seeing the vast world of the Daluotian continent, how could they be willing to dominate the lower realm? However, after the excitement, Old Man Wei was the first to calm down and said in a deep voice, "The Eastern Domain now has 3 top forces. If you suddenly want to establish a force, will High Heaven Sect and Imperial Heaven Pavilion agree? Also, if we directly use Kunlun as our name, will people suspect that we are from the lower realm?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "No, Kunlun Mountain did not have any forces 10,000 years ago. After Dugu Weiwei and Ning Xuanji came to the Daluotian continent, no one mentioned anything about the lower realm. The term Kunlun exists in many ancient books and will not be suspected. As for Imperial Heaven Pavilion and High Heaven Sect, I will inform them. After a month, we will hold the founding ceremony of our holy church in the southern wilderness." The founding ceremony was complicated and required many things to be mobilized, so Chu Xiu handed it over to Wei Shuya to handle. Wei Shuya was mature and experienced, so he was most suitable for this kind of thing. Moreover, Chu Xiu first went to Imperial Heaven Pavilion and High Heaven Sect to deliver the invitations, of course, to tell them about this matter. Outside Imperial Heaven Pavilion, when they heard that Chu Xiu had come to visit, Zhong Qiushui, Lu Sanjin, and a group of Imperial Heaven Pavilion elders even came out to greet him personally. In fact, Imperial Heaven Pavilion was also a little confused about Chu Xiu's attitude. Even they themselves did not know what kind of attitude they should use to treat Chu Xiu. Nominally, Chu Xiu was still the county governor of Imperial Heaven Pavilion. But in fact, Chu Xiu had long left Imperial Heaven Pavilion and was in charge of the southern wilderness. At the beginning, Zhong Qiushui paid the price of the entire southern wilderness being under Chu Xiu's control in exchange for Chu Xiu standing on his side in the fight for the position of pavilion master. From then on, the two sides were no longer in a subordinate relationship. Moreover, with the recent news that Chu Xiu had destroyed Vishnu Palace, Zhong Qiushui was even more certain of this. 2 martial immortals and the entire Vishnu Palace, this force was already stronger than Imperial Heaven Pavilion, but in the end, it was still destroyed by Chu Xiu. In this case, if Chu Xiu wanted to destroy his Imperial Heaven Pavilion, wouldn't it be very easy? Therefore, from the beginning when he saw Chu Xiu, Zhong Qiushui had been feeling very awkward because he did not know what kind of attitude he should use to face Chu Xiu. Seeing Zhong Qiushui like this, Chu Xiu did not bother to keep him in suspense anymore. Chu Xiu said directly, "Pavilion Master, I'm actually here to tell you something this time." "What is it?" With a solemn expression, Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "I'm preparing to completely leave Imperial Heaven Pavilion and establish an independent force in the southern wilderness, called the Kunlun Devil Cult. A month later, I'll hold a founding ceremony in the southern wilderness, and I'd like to invite Imperial Heaven Pavilion to participate." In the lower realm, the Fiend Path was condemned as heresy, so most of the martial artists of the Kunlun Devil Cult called themselves the Sacred Sect. However, it did not matter in the Daluotian. The Fiend Path was also one of the many martial paths, and it was not a sensitive matter. Therefore, Chu Xiu directly called it the Devil Cult, and it could also distinguish the forces in the lower realm and the lower realm. The lower realm was the Sacred Sect, and the Daluotian was the Fiend Sect. As soon as he said that, the entire Imperial Heaven Pavilion fell silent, and it was dead silent. Even Lu Sanjin widened his eyes as if he did not expect Chu Xiu to actually say such a thing. After a while, an Imperial Heaven Pavilion elder jumped up immediately and pointed at Chu Xiu with a furious expression as he reprimanded, "Chu Xiu, you're ungrateful. If it weren't for Imperial Heaven Pavilion, how would you be where you are today? Now that your wings have grown, you want to divide Imperial Heaven Pavilion when it's in a weak period just because you have some strength. Do you think you're worthy of the old Pavilion Master's attention? Do you still?" Slap. Before that elder could finish speaking, he was sent flying by Zhong Qiushui's slap. As he wiped the blood from the corner of his mouth, he looked at Zhong Qiushui in disbelief. Zhong Qiushui scoffed coldly. "Do you have the right to speak here? Shut up if you don't know the rules." Zhong Qiushui turned around and let out a long sigh. He smiled at Chu Xiu as if he was relieved. "Actually, you should have taken this step a long time ago. It's too late now. Should I address you as Cult Master Chu from now on? This title sounds a lot more pleasing to the ear. Don't worry, I'll be back in a month to attend the ceremony." Chu Xiu cupped his fists with a smile on his face and said, "Thank you, Pavilion Master. I'll take my leave now." After saying that, Chu Xiu immediately left. He did not even bother to look at the cultivator who had spoken rudely. After Chu Xiu left completely, everyone looked at Zhong Qiushui in confusion. Chu Xiu's independence from Imperial Heaven Pavilion was not only a huge blow to Imperial Heaven Pavilion's reputation, but Chu Xiu had also taken away one of Imperial Heaven Pavilion's counties, Kangwu County. Zhong Qiushui was someone who dared to fight to the death against Yi Weikong's Cold River City. Why would he concede in such a sullen manner when facing Chu Xiu? Chapter 1341. The people of the Imperial Sky Pavilion felt that Zhong Qiushui had changed. He was no longer the overbearing Zhong Qiushui. Facing everyone's gaze, Zhong Qiushui sighed and said, "When it's time to be tough, you're not tough. When it's time to be flexible, you don't know how to be flexible. What are all of you thinking? Do you know what's the situation in the southern barbaric land, including Kangwu County? They're all Chu Xiu's men. I've already promised Chu Xiu that Kangwu County and the southern barbaric land will be handed over to Chu Xiu to govern. Therefore, that place is no longer the territory of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. Chu Xiu's words are the law, and the words of the Imperial Sky Pavilion are basically equivalent to fart. In such a situation, what's the difference if Chu Xiu establishes a sect or not? Also, set your sights further away. Don't always stare at such a small place like the Eastern region. Chu Xiu's position is stuck between the Eastern region and the Southern region. Once the Southern region is prepared to attack the Eastern region, the first to face will definitely be Chu Xiu. Therefore, no matter what Chu Xiu's identity is, as long as he still admits that he's from the Eastern region, he's the ally of the Imperial Sky Pavilion. In the past, the old Pavilion Master treated him well. Both of us also have some kinship. Zhong Qiushui paused. Just when the others thought he had finished speaking, Zhong Qiushui said faintly, "Of course, there's another more important matter. Which one of you is Chu Xiu's opponent? Who can destroy the Vishnu Temple, one of the three main temples of the Sanskrit sect, with a surprise attack? Is it him or you? The entire Imperial Sky Pavilion can't do it. The pugilistic world is a place where strength is important. The pool of the Imperial Sky Pavilion is too shallow to accommodate a true dragon. Why don't we generously do him a favor and let him leave calmly? If we really shed all pretense of cordiality, we'll only be trapped in our own web and won't get any benefits." It was rare for Zhong Qiushui to be clear-headed. This time he was very open-minded, even more so than Lu Sanjin. When the other people from the Imperial Sky Pavilion heard Zhong Qiushui's words, They stopped talking nonsense, including the elder who was slapped earlier. Chu Xiu was already unstoppable. Even if they wanted to stop him, they wouldn't be able to. A few days later, Chu Xiu arrived at High Heaven Sect at the fastest speed possible. As soon as he saw Chu Xiu, Fang Yinglong laughed heartily as he walked over and said, "Chu, you have destroyed the Vishnu Palace of Sanskrit sect and made a name for yourselves in the 4 regions. Congratulations." Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "That's not a good thing. If it wasn't for the Sanskrit sect causing trouble for me again and again, I wouldn't have made a move against them. Now I'm in the limelight, but when the Sanskrit sect gets the chance, they won't let me off." Chu Xiu's words made Fang Yinglong speechless. "You already know the consequences, yet you still acted so ruthlessly, directly destroying a temple of the Sanskrit sect." Fang Yinglong could only laugh awkwardly as he welcomed Chu Xiu into the hall. After finding Qin Baiyuan and Ling Huxiu, Fang Yinglong asked directly, "May I know why Chu has come to my High Heaven sect this time?" Fang Yinglong had roughly figured out Chu Xiu's temper. He was definitely the kind of person who wouldn't visit a temple without a reason. If he had nothing to do, he wouldn't have come to High Heaven sect to catch up with them. Chu Xiu said directly, "I plan to leave Imperial Sky Pavilion and establish my own sect in the southern wilderness, called the Kunlun Devil Cult. The founding ceremony will be held in a month, so I came to invite Sect Master Fang and everyone from High Heaven sect to attend the ceremony and help me promote it." After listening to Chu Xiu, Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, and Ling Huxianshan looked at each other, their eyes filled with shock. They didn't expect that Chu Xiu would come to talk to them about this. But after thinking about it carefully, they felt it was normal. For example, a sect in the Southern Territory could establish a top force with a first or second heaven martial immortal. On the surface, Chu Xiu had the strength of a third heaven martial immortal, but he could almost rival a fifth heaven martial immortal. A temple of the Sanskrit sect was destroyed just like that. Most of the people in the pugilistic world only saw Chu Xiu's strength. However, some of the martial artists from the big sects saw the power behind Chu Xiu. Killing Yin Tuoyuo was easy as long as Chu Xiu was strong enough. But how many elite masters were needed to break through the Brahma sect's main hall and exterminate Vishnu temple? It wasn't easy to cultivate them, but Chu Xiu had such power under his command. It could be said that Chu Xiu was stronger than Imperial Sky Pavilion now, so it wasn't strange for him to make such a choice. After a while, Fang Yinglong cupped his hands and said, "Congratulations to Cult Master Chu. But there's one more thing we need to know. After the establishment of Kunlun Devil Cult, will Cult Master Chu's attitude towards the Eastern Territory change?" Fang Yinglong didn't care what Imperial Sky Pavilion thought. As the #1 sect in the Eastern Territory, he was only worried about the changes in the Eastern Territory. Chu Xiu said in a deep voice, "Sect Master Fang, please rest assured. Kunlun Devil Cult is established in the southern barbaric land and will guard the Eastern Territory forever. I'm from the Eastern Territory, and I have deep grievances with the Southern Territory martial world. No matter what, my attitude will not change." Fang Yinglong stood up and solemnly cupped his hands and said, "I hope that from now on High Heaven Sect and Kunlun Devil Cult will never become enemies and will guard the Eastern Territory together." Chu Xiu also stood up and cupped his hands. "Definitely." Both sides spoke with certainty, but in reality, even they themselves knew that it was basically impossible. They didn't fall out now because they had a common goal and common interests. Within a month after leaving High Heaven Sect, the news that Kunlun Devil Cult was about to be established had spread throughout the Eastern Territory and the 4 Daluotian territories. The establishment of a top sect with 3 martial immortals was considered a major event in the entire Daluotian continent. Moreover, in the Eastern Territory, Kunlun Devil Cult directly spread the news that Kunlun Devil Cult was recruiting a large number of disciples. Not only that, but the entire sect could directly join the Kunlun Devil Cult. The Starry River Martial Institution established by Meng Xinghe was very peaceful. Every bit of opportunity that could be pulled over was a bit of opportunity, and every bit of karmic luck was a bit of karmic luck. As for Chu Xiu, he was preparing to directly copy the route of the Kunlun Devil Cult in the lower realm. Cultivators with loose cultivator backgrounds who wanted to join the Kunlun Devil Cult would be accepted regardless of whether they were good or bad. However, only those who were strong enough and had outstanding talent could be recruited into the various halls of the Kunlun Devil Cult, while the weak could only be at the lowest level. However, Chu Xiu didn't mind having too many people. The Kunlun Devil Cult in the Daluotian continent was not smaller than the lower realm. As for the other small sects and families who were willing to join the Kunlun Devil Cult, they could also become its vassals. As long as they performed well, their patriarch and sect master could even become a demon envoy of the Kunlun devil cult, and their disciples could also formally join the Kunlun devil cult. In fact, although this method could make the strength of the Kunlun devil cult skyrocket in a short period of time, the drawbacks were also very obvious. That was, their sense of belonging to the Kunlun devil cult would be greatly reduced. However, this didn't matter. Whether it was the Dugu Weiwei from 500 years ago or the current Chuxiu, what they required from their subordinates was never loyalty, but obedience and ability. 500 years ago, when the Kunlun devil cult was at its peak, there were countless vassals under their command, who dared to rebel. Only after the Kunlun devil cult was destroyed did some vassal forces betray the Kunlun devil cult. However, there were also some vassal forces that were loyal, such as the Yin demon sect. This was enough for Chuxiu. When he was around, he could suppress this group of people with his prestige. When he was not around, if the Kunlun devil cult couldn't even suppress this group of people, it would prove that the Kunlun devil cult had already gone from prosperity to decline. It was already on the verge of collapse. Therefore, at that time, even if they were loyal, it would be useless. When Chuxiu's words came out, the entire Eastern Territory was in an uproar. No sectarian bias, regardless of origin, and even if you wanted your entire family to join, it wouldn't affect your own inheritance. This kind of generous conditions could already attract many cultivators. Those cultivators who were rogue cultivators and looked down upon by the top sects such as High Heaven sect had already set off for the southern barbaric land. There were also some small sects and families that were often bullied by the big sections. They also decided to join the Kunlun devil cult and join Chuxiu in exchange for a backer. In the Nine Phoenix Sword sect in Fanglin County, Lin Fengwu looked at the news about the Kunlun devil cult and said to Lin Yazi with a firm look, "Father, I've decided to merge the entire Nine Phoenix Sword sect into the Kunlun devil cult and become a vassal of the Kunlun devil cult. I also want to join the Kunlun devil cult." At this time, Lin Fengwu had already reached the true fire soul refining realm, and her talent was outstanding. At this time, she had reached the peak of the true fire soul refining realm, and her combat power was even stronger than her father Lin Yazi. So during this time, Lin Yazi had actually begun to gradually retire, handing over the Nine Phoenix Sword sect to his daughter. The Nine Phoenix Sword sect had suffered great changes, and Lin Yazi's thoughts had long since changed. So what if they were a man or a woman? He had no son, no accomplished disciple, only such an outstanding daughter, so he had decided to officially hand over the Nine Phoenix Sword sect to Lin Fengwu. After listening, Lin Yazi sighed and said, "Joining is fine. You can make the decisions in the Nine Phoenix Sword sect now, but daughter, have you not forgotten that official Chu?" Lin Fengwu shook her head and said with a firm look, "I chose to let the Nine Phoenix Sword sect merge with the Kunlun devil cult not because of official Chu, but for the sake of our Nine Phoenix Sword sect. Our Nine Phoenix Sword sect is not the strongest in Fanglin County, and after joining the Kunlun devil cult, we have a backer. Also, our Nine Phoenix Sword sect's inheritance is limited, and if I want to step into the heaven and earth mystic attainment realm, I can only wait for time. However, if I join a large sect like the Imperial Sky Pavilion, I will definitely give up the Nine Phoenix Sword sect. Only the Kunlun devil cult doesn't have such restrictions. For me and the entire Nine Phoenix Sword sect, joining the Kunlun devil cult is the right choice." Lin Fengwu's words were clear and logical, but only she knew what exactly she was thinking in her heart. Regardless of the reason, the entire eastern region was in an uproar because of the establishment of the Kunlun devil cult. Within a month, all the large sects had already swarmed into the southern barbaric land. At the same time, regardless of whether the relationship between the other three regions was good or bad, they also sent people to attend the ceremony according to the usual practice. Chapter 1342. At the edge of Kangwu County, in the land of southern barbarism. This place was no longer the same as when Chuxiu first came, where the dense forest was overgrown with vegetation and wild beasts everywhere. Instead, the martial artists of the Kunlun devil cult opened up a wide road. The surrounding barbarian tribes also escaped into the depths of the dense forest because of the threat of the Black Luo tribe and the various resources provided by Chuxiu, forming a barrier for the Kunlun devil cult. Palaces and pavilions rose from the depths of the dense forest. Not only did they not feel out of place, but there was even a sense of desolation and grandeur. A portion of the East region martial artists walked on the main road and looked at the surrounding buildings. There were also groups of Kunlun devil cult disciples dressed in black with cold expressions and extremely murderous aura on their bodies. Everyone couldn't help but shiver. Previously, they thought that Chu Xiu's decision to establish the Kunlun Devil cult was only made after his strength skyrocketed. However, looking at the buildings and palaces in the land of southern barbarism, as well as the martial artists cultivated by his subordinates, was it possible that all of these were prepared in a hurry? Obviously, a long time ago when Chu Xiu was still a disciple of the Emperor's Sky Pavilion and was still fighting for the Emperor's Sky Pavilion, he actually already had the intention to stand on his own feet. From this point they could see the depth of Chu Xiu's schemes. However, he was actually able to hold on until he fell out with the Emperor's Sky Pavilion. In the end, the Emperor's Sky Pavilion even personally came to congratulate the establishment of the Kunlun Devil cult. This was simply unbelievable. At this moment, everyone suddenly realized that there was a dispute in front of them. A martial artist dressed in luxurious clothes shouted at the Kunlun Devil cult disciple who was guarding the door as if he was very dissatisfied. What does the Kunlun Devil cult mean by this? Official Chu said that we, the small sects, are welcome to come and seek refuge, but in the end you don't even let us enter the door. Are you looking down on our Linqijiang family? The disciple of the Kunlun Devil cult who was guarding the door restrained himself. He knew that today was a big day for the Kunlun Devil cult to establish their sect in the Daluotian, so he didn't want to blow things up. One had to know that he was an old man who had fought alongside Chu Xiu ever since he joined the Azure Dragon Society. If anyone in the lower realms had dared to speak to him in such a manner, he would have long since slapped them across the face. But here he could only patiently explain, Patriarch Jiang, my Kunlun Devil cult welcomes everyone, but today is my Kunlun Devil cult's founding ceremony. Not only will there be warriors from the East region, but there will also be people from the other 3 regions, so we can't accommodate so many people. It would have been fine if only a few people from the Jiang clan had come. However, there are over 100 of you here. How can I let all of you in? The entire Kangwu County is my Kunlun Devil cult's territory. Patriarch Jiang, you can only bring a few trusted subordinates in and let the rest in Kangwu County. However, the Jiang clan's patriarch's attitude was extremely unyielding. He pointed at the disciple who was guarding the door and said angrily, I don't care. You didn't say anything about this before. Official Chu is a man of great talent and strategy. He is broad-minded and tolerant. How could he do something like keep his guests outside the door? I think it's you little guards who are making things difficult for us with a chicken feather. Who is your superior? I want to see the higher-ups of the Kunlun Devil cult and seek justice for me. On the other side, Lin Yazi and Lin Fengwu were also in the crowd. Seeing that the Jiang clan's patriarch was being unreasonable, Lin Fengwu immediately wanted to stand out and stop him, but she was stopped by Lin Yazi. Silly girl, do you think that fellow is causing trouble? Lin Fengwu frowned and said, Today is my Kunlun Devil cult's grand opening day. If he isn't causing trouble, then what is he? Lin Yazi was speechless. As expected, a grown girl cannot be kept at home. She hasn't even joined the Kunlun Devil cult and she's already saying, my Kunlun Devil cult. Lin Yazi explained, that Jiang clan is able to mix in Linqi County like a fish in water. Does he look like an idiot to you? Would he dare to challenge the Kunlun Devil cult at a time like this? He wouldn't dare even if he was given 2 guts. He was only using some tricks to attract Official Chu's attention. Listen to his words. There isn't the slightest bit of slander towards Official Chu in his words. Instead, he's praising him. When Official Chu comes out and sees this scene, in order to win people's hearts, he'll definitely scold the disciple guarding the door. Then he'll put on a magnanimous appearance and welcome them in. When the time comes, the other small powers that want to join the Kunlun Devil cult will see that Official Chu has this kind of attitude towards the Jiang clan. They'll definitely be completely convinced. This is like buying a horse's bones with 1,000 pieces of gold. Right now, the Jiang clan wants to take the initiative to be that horse's bones. Girl, your strength isn't bad now, but you're still a bit lacking when it comes to playing tricks with these old foxes. After Lin Fengwu heard this, she laughed coldly and said, If that's the case, then this Jiang clan is simply being too clever for their own good. They're playing with fire and burning themselves. Lin Yazi was stunned and said, What did you say? Lin Fengwu said indifferently, Official Chu is scheming, but he's always disdained to play such low-level tricks. He won't mistreat his own people just to win people's hearts. Lin Yazi wanted to say something, but on the other side 2 people slowly walked over. One of them was playing with a golden dragon-shaped flying dagger, while the other was expressionless, carrying a heavy sword on his back. They were Tanya and Yenbu Gue. Tanya said lazily, I'm his superior who's looking for me? The Jiang clan head had just stepped forward, but before he could say anything, Tangya's expression suddenly changed and he said coldly, "Cripple him." Behind him, Yen Bugue took a step forward, and the huge force caused the whole ground to tremble. The heavy sword pressed down like a mountain, but its speed was extremely fast, like a gray meteor, and the crowd could only see a shadow. Bang! An explosive sound rang out, and the shield of vigor on the Jiang clan head's body was like a piece of paper, easily torn apart. All the bones in his body were accurately smashed by Yen Bugue, and he was directly sent flying. His whole body was covered in blood and he had already lost consciousness. Tangya looked around and said lightly, "Today is the great day of the founding of our Kunlun devil cult, so it's not appropriate to kill, so I'll spare his life." "What kind of trash dares to play tricks in front of the Kunlun devil cult? You really don't know what you're talking about." After saying that, Tangya pointed at the disciple guarding the door, and pointed at him resentfully, "Look at you, you've been following the cult leader for a long time, and you can't even carry a sword after sleeping with too many women? Why are you wasting so much time talking nonsense with this kind of trash? Remember, the Kunlun devil cult accepts all rivers into the sea, but once you're in the sea, don't use the tricks from the river to make a fool of yourself in the sea." The disciple guarding the door instantly turned red, and he defended himself, "I didn't sleep with women, I'm still a virgin." Tangya laughed and scolded him, "Who cares if you're a virgin or not? You've never touched a woman and you're so proud? Guard the door well and remember what I said." Before leaving, Tangya also looked around at the people present. There was no smile in his eyes, only a cold chill. Tangya's words were not only directed at the disciple guarding the door, but also at them. There weren't many restrictions to join the Kunlun devil cult, but there were many rules, and the most basic rule was respect. The disciples of the small forces and the rogue martial artists present all shivered, and they obediently registered and entered one by one. Some people felt that they had brought too many people, and they immediately sent them away, leaving only 2 or 3 confidants for fear of causing trouble. On the other side of the road, 2 monks were watching everything there. One of them was a young monk in white with his eyes closed. It was Fajing, and there was also a kind-looking old monk, but he had the cultivation of the 7th celestial layer. The old monk was the head of the heavenly Luo treasure temple's Xitigarbha pavilion, Ji Kong. He learned that the Kunlun devil cult was establishing a sect, so he came to attend the ceremony. Chu Xiu had cooperated with the heavenly Luo treasure temple twice, and both sides could be considered to have a good relationship. Of course, with Chu Xiu's strength, it was certainly not enough for the head of the life transformation pavilion, Jishan Zen Master, to personally come to congratulate him, so they sent the prestigious head of the Xitigarbha pavilion, Ji Kong, and the heir of the life transformation pavilion, Fajing. This kind of combination could be considered to be giving face to Chu Xiu. "Fajing, these people under Chu Xiu, what do you think of them?" Fajing said in a deep voice, "Their strength is strong, their background is deep, and their sense of belonging to the sect is very strong. Their bodies have a strong murderous aura, and it is obvious that they are the kind of martial artists who have walked out of countless battles. The most important thing is that Chu Xiu has a lot of these martial artists, even more than our life transformation pavilion. No wonder he was able to destroy the Vishnu temple. This kind of martial artists, even if they are not martial immortals, not to mention destroying the Vishnu temple, they can even compete with the Shiva temple." Previously in the exalted divine palace, the few people under his command were not ordinary people, but now it seems that this is not his full strength. Ji Kong said doubtfully, "That is why I am puzzled, where did this Chu Xiu get these people? In recent years I have not heard of any large-scale battles in the eastern region. How did he train these disciples?" Fajing did not speak, obviously he was also puzzled about this point. Ji Kong shook his head and said, "Forget it, don't think too much about it. Chu Xiu destroyed the Vishnu temple, so he has formed a great enmity with the Sanskrit sect. They will definitely not let him go. Therefore the stronger he is, the better. As long as he can stop the Sanskrit sect, he will be a good ally for the heavenly Luo treasure temple." "I heard that the Sanskrit sect also came this time?" Fajing suddenly said. Ji Kong nodded and said, "Maybe they saw us coming, so they also sent people. They probably don't want to admit in front of the Daluotian people that they lost miserably. Then if the Sanskrit people come looking for trouble, should we help?" Ji Kong smiled and said, "This is the founding ceremony of the Kunlun devil cult, why should we join in the fun? Whether or not they will lose face, it is Chu Xiu's business, it has nothing to do with us. In other words, if he can't even solve this small matter, why should he open a sect, what faction?" The Venerable Buddha said not to meddle in other people's business. The Venerable Buddha did not say that. Fajing's face was solemn. The Venerable Buddha said so many words, it is no big deal for this poor monk to add another one. Let's go in and see what this so-called Kunlun devil cult looks like. Chapter 1343. In front of the square of the central hall of the Kunlun devil cult, the ground was paved with black stone slabs, and the complex spirit array patterns shone with starlight, illuminating the entire square. The buildings of the entire Kunlun devil cult were square and flat. Although they were simple, they gave off a solemn and oppressive feeling, which was completely different from the Daluotian architectural style. This also made the cultivators of the small sects all look solemn, not daring to make any noise. When the Kunlun devil cult first said that it was going to be established, they thought that Chuxio's reputation was worth joining. But at that time they all thought that the Kunlun devil cult was just a grassroots organization, but now it seemed that its grandeur was even not inferior to that of big sects like High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion. The spirit arrays on the ground, in particular, were obviously the work of a master of spirit arrays and were not ordinary. Chuxio sat in the center of the square in front of the main hall, while Wei Shuya and the others sat around him, waiting for the auspicious time to come and start the founding ceremony. The Eastern Territory was close to the Water Pavilion, so almost all the people had arrived. Imperial Sky Pavilion was the first to arrive. Zhong Qiushui came in person with Lu Sanjin and a group of Imperial Sky Pavilion elders, giving Chuxio enough face. Imperial Sky Pavilion even gave Chuxio a big gift, which was an array plate that had been passed down from ancient times, the kind that could change its position at will. The production of array plates was much more difficult than spirit arrays because it had to be moved frequently, so the materials used were more precious. This scene also let the other sects of the Eastern Territory know that Chuxio had left Imperial Sky Pavilion, but there was no conflict between the two sides. Instead, they parted ways peacefully, and the relationship between the two sides was even good. High Heaven Sect also came. Fang Yinglong and Qin Baiyuan came with their disciples and presented gifts, leaving only Linghu Immortal Mountain to guard High Heaven Sect. This was also giving Chuxio enough face. Among these sects of the Eastern Territory, only Cold River City did not come. This also let everyone know how much Yi Weikong hated Chuxio. Many of the Daluotian sects were very particular about their reputation. Even if the two sides fought fiercely at times like this, both sides would still care about face. For example, High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion had been fighting ever since they descended to the mortal world, but once the two sides held some kind of big celebration, those who were supposed to come would come, although it was inevitable that there would be some tension. But this time, not a single person from Cold River City came. It could be imagined how much they hated Chuxio that they didn't even care about their dignity. After the people from the southern region arrived, people from the other regions also began to arrive. The martial artist standing guard at the entrance of the square shouted, "The Southern Domain's Heavenly Demon Sect congratulates." Other than the people from the East Domain, the Heavenly Demon Sect was the first to arrive from the Outer Domain. However, everyone knew that Chuxio had a friendly relationship with the Sky Devil Palace. Both sides had once joined hands to destroy the Blissful Devil Palace. Therefore, it wasn't strange for the Sky Devil Palace to be so proactive. Congratulations, Cult Master Chu. We, the Diabolism, finally have a powerful ally. Yuan Kongqing smiled and handed over the congratulatory gift with a very kind attitude. When he chose to help Chuxio pass on the information of the Sword Sect under the heavens, he was gambling on Chuxio's future. As a result, his gamble paid off. Chuxio's growth was even faster than he had imagined. As for whether Chuxio would have a conflict with his Heavenly Demon Palace, Yuan Kongqing wasn't worried at all. For 10,000 years each domain had existed alone. If Chuxio was in the southern domain, Yuan Kongqing would be wary and even reject him, but in the east domain the two sides could become allies. Palace Master Yuan is too polite, please sit down. After Yuan Kongqing arrived, the other sects of the southern domain, the Sword Sect under the heavens, the Great Thousand Sect, and the Battle God Sect also arrived. It was worth mentioning that Xing Jiyuan stood on the side of the Sword Sect under the heavens, and the Sword Sect under the heavens had even brought Fang Qishao. However, seeing Fang Qishao's appearance, Chuxio was a little nervous. He knew Fang Qishao's character, and it was best not to expose himself on such an occasion. Fortunately, Fang Qishao knew that he was a spy, so he didn't look at Chuxio and the others, but looked left and right as if he had never seen the world before. After being reprimanded by Mu Baishuang, he became obedient. 3 Pure Temple, Mysterious Heaven Realm, and Spirit Treasure Temple of the Northern Domain are here to congratulate you. Other than Spirit Treasure Temples in Lingzi, Chuxio hadn't had much contact with the other sects in the Northern Domain. However, such a big event like the establishment of a sect, the northern domain naturally had to make a trip after hearing the news. 3 Pure Temple sent an elder and Fang Yizhen, who had dealt with Chu Xiu in the Daluo Divine Palace. Only 1 elder from Mysterious Heaven Realm came. Spirit Treasure Temple sent Yin Lingzi and a middle-aged Taoist. The Western Domain's Tianluo Treasure Temple is here to congratulate you. Ji Kong and Fa Jing walked into the hall, and immediately attracted a lot of attention. Previously, both parties had joined forces to kill the Brahma sect's Vishnu Palace, and it had shaken the entire Daluocean, which was a big event. With the current relationship between both parties, even if they weren't official allies in the eyes of other Daluocean martial artists, they were allies. Therefore, it was normal for the Tianluo Treasure Temple to send someone over. Congratulations to Cult Master Chu. Ji Kong had never dealt with Chu Xiu before, and Fa Jing was a man of few words, so both parties only exchanged a few words before they were invited to a seat of honor. Just when everyone thought that everyone had arrived and the ceremony could begin, the disciple outside the door announced loudly, Star River Martial Academy's Supremacy Fang Daochen is here to congratulate you. Hearing this name, everyone present had a strange expression. No one had expected the Star River Martial Academy to send someone over. In fact, when the Star River Martial Academy was established, everyone present had also sent someone over. However, compared to Chu Xiu, the Star River Martial Academy was much more low-key. The path that Meng Xinghe wanted to take was different from Chu Xiu. Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and pondered. Others thought that Chu Xiu and Meng Xinghe were taking different paths, but in fact, both of them had the same goal. They both wanted to obtain enough providence before the arrival of the era of great battles. With what he had done in the eastern region, the Star River Martial Academy could forget about recruiting a disciple in the eastern region. He believed that Meng Xinghe could also tell that both parties were now competitors. Fang Daochen was a middle-aged man dressed in Taoist robes. He was also a Taoist primogenitor. His Taoist name was Qin Hui, and he was a 4th firmament martial immortal. After entering, Fang Daochen waved his horsetail whisk and said to Chu Xiu in a deep voice, Congratulations to Cult Master Chu for establishing the Kunlun Devil Cult and making a name for himself in the eastern region. Cult Master Chu is also a member of the primogenitor's lineage. In the future we must get closer to him. 2 of the primogenitor's lineage have already appeared in the world. Unfettered Meng also hopes that the Star River Martial Academy, the Kunlun Devil Cult, and even the primogenitor's lineage will have a long life of providence. Fang Daochen emphasized the word fate, but it was hard to tell what he meant. Chu Xiu said indifferently, Daoist Fang, please take a seat. Please thank Unfettered Meng on my behalf. With so many people here, everyone thought that the event was about to begin. However, the gatekeeper's voice came from outside again. However, this time the gatekeeper's voice was a little hesitant. He hemmed and hawed but did not call out the name. At this time, a slightly stiff voice said loudly, Luoshan tribe Xiao Wu and Longshan, on behalf of the old barbarian king, congratulate Cult Master Chu for establishing the sect and passing it on for thousands of generations. Upon hearing this, everyone's expression suddenly changed. All the forces that bordered the 100,000 mountains had heard of the Luoshan tribe. Even those who had not heard of the Luoshan tribe knew of the existence of the old barbarian king, who was almost the strongest among the barbarians. What was he doing here when the Kunlun Devil Cult was establishing a sect? Fa Jing whispered to Ji Kong, Uncle Master, who is the old barbarian king? Although Fa Jing's cultivation was strong enough, he was still considered to be of the younger generation. He usually only focused on cultivation, so he did not know much about these things. Ji Kong said in a deep voice, that old man should be the most difficult to deal with among the barbarians. The barbarians' inheritance was endless. In addition to some of the barbarian tribes having some inherited artifacts, there would also be 1 or 2 top experts emerging in every generation of the barbarians. The old barbarian king was such an existence. Moreover, I heard that the old barbarian king was not simple. He even had some karma with some of the big Daluocean sections. But why would the barbarians rush to congratulate Chu Xiu? No, something was wrong. When the southern barbarian land was under the jurisdiction of the Imperial Sky Pavilion, there were frequent barbarian riots. But when it was under the control of Chu Xiu, there was not even a single riot. And how did Chu Xiu cross the 100,000 mountains to attack the Sanskrit sect? If it was just him alone, it wouldn't be a problem. But at that time Chu Xiu had brought tens of thousands of Kunlun demon cult elites with him. Even if those barbarians were blind, they would still be able to sense it. Ji Kong could detect these things, and so could everyone present. Everyone had a strange expression on their faces. Could it be that Chu Xiu had colluded with the barbarians? Of course, this was not a big deal. In fact, all the big sects had certain transactions with the barbarians. It was just that they did not put it on the surface. Moreover, they used shoddy goods to cheat the barbarians. If it was a small sect doing this, it was estimated that there would be people who would take care of it. But for an existence like Chu Xiu who could destroy a temple of the Sanskrit sect, no one would even care about it. At this time, there was a violent vibration on the ground, and there was a loud sound of friction. At the entrance of the square, Long San directly dragged a brown flood dragon into the square. The flood dragon was hundreds of feet long. Compared to the flood dragon, Long San's small giant-like body was not even as big as the flood dragon's head. As soon as he came in, he shouted, "This mountain flood dragon was personally hunted by the old barbarian king. I'm exhausted dragging it all the way here. I want to eat meat and drink wine." Next to Long San was a middle-aged man in a brocade robe. Although he was also dark-skinned and tall, his manner of dressing was no different from that of the Daluotian martial artists. He cupped his hands in a stiff Central Plains Chinese and said, "In order to congratulate the cult master Chu for establishing a sect, the old barbarian king specially went to the depths of the 100,000 mountains to hunt this earth flood dragon as a gift. Our tribe values friendship with friends the most. Official Chu established a sect in the southern barbarian land and is our neighbor. May the friendship between both sides last forever." Chapter 1344. When Long Shan and Xiao Wu came with congratulatory gifts and said those words about friendship, Chu Xiu knew that he had been made a fool of by the old barbarian king. The old man might be a barbarian, but he didn't have the simple and honest demeanor of a barbarian. In fact, he was a cunning old fox. Now that he had said these words in front of so many people, he had basically confirmed that Chu Xiu was in cahoots with the barbarians. In this way, even if Chu Xiu didn't want to continue the trade with the barbarian tribe, he had no choice but to do so. This was because if he stopped the trade, it would be equivalent to losing the friendship of the Luoshan tribe, and it would be even more unworthy. Of course, the old barbarian king also knew that Chu Xiu didn't have the slightest opinion of the barbarian race in so many years. In fact, he was willing to trade with the barbarians on equal terms. Therefore he wouldn't go too far. That earth dragon was a high-level ferocious beast. It was an existence comparable to a human martial immortal or above. It had not appeared in the outside world for several hundred years. Every drop of its blood was a treasure. It could be said that this earth flood dragon was worth 10 times more than all the gifts given by everyone present. Moreover, General Xiao's emphasis on the word friendship also indicated that the two sides were close allies. The strength of the old barbarian king wasn't weak. Chu Xiu couldn't see through his cultivation. The opposite party was at least at the 8th celestial layer. In fact, he might even be in existence at the 9th celestial layer. With such an expert as an ally, even if the sect leader of the Sanskrit sect wanted to touch Chu Xiu, he would have to consider whether he could cross the 100,000 mountains. Old barbarian king had indeed used some tricks to send congratulatory gifts. However, Chu Xiu didn't resist these tricks. After all, he could see the benefits on the surface. Besides, Chu Xiu wasn't a Daluotian, so he didn't really care much about his reputation of colluding with the barbarians. Although the Daluotian martial artists were wary of the barbarians and viewed them as a different race, it was not to the point where they hated them to the point where they had to kill them. Compared to the barbarian race, their own hatred was much deeper. For example, if the heavenly Luo Baoshao were to choose whether to destroy the barbarians or the Brahmin sect, they would definitely choose the latter. Chu Xiu had been called a devil in the mortal world for several years, so his reputation of colluding with the barbarians was nothing. Therefore, Chu Xiu waved his hand generously and said, "Put away the gifts. Please take a seat." A smile emerged on Xiao Wu's face. He was one of the trusted subordinates of the old barbarian king. He had been trained in the same way as the experts of the human race. Therefore, his way of thinking was almost the same as that of the human race. Chu Xiu was indeed an interesting person. His reaction was just as old barbarian king had guessed. Long Shan asked loudly from the side, "Is there any wine and meat?" "Don't worry, there will be enough wine and meat." Chu Xiu took a look at the time. The auspicious hour had arrived, and the founding ceremony could officially begin. Chu Xiu stood in the middle of the square and said in a deep voice, "Everyone." Just as he said these two words, a loud laugh came from outside. "Why is it starting when everyone is not here yet? Cult Master Chu can't wait to establish his own sect?" The voice did not wait for the disciples of the Kunlun devil cult to report and had already taken the initiative to barge in. Everyone's eyes narrowed and revealed a playful look. The person who had come to destroy the ceremony was here. Chu Xiu had just destroyed a hall of the Brahmin sect, and here he immediately began to establish his own sect. It could be said that he was proud of his success. No matter what, the Brahmin sect was still one of the top sects in the world. How could they tolerate Chu Xiu's arrogance? A middle-aged martial artist wearing a black Sanskrit robe walked into the square. Behind him were more than 10 martial artists from the Brahmin sect. Of course, the most eye-catching thing was that he was holding a big bell engraved with Sanskrit characters. The playful look on the faces of the people present became even more intense. Sending a bell to someone's founding ceremony? Isn't the Brahmin sect a little too straightforward? Ji Kong glanced at the middle-aged man and sent a voice transmission to Chu Xiu. Cult Master Chu, this is Suanna, the palace master of the Brahmin sect's Divine Peacock Palace. He is a 6th heavenly layer martial immortal. The Divine Peacock Palace is ranked in the top 3 among the many divine palaces of the Brahmin sect. Chu Xiu nodded slightly. A cold glint appeared in his eyes as he said, the Brahmin sect failed to live up to expectations and had one of their halls destroyed by me. So, you want to return the favor now? You want to give me a bell? Aren't you afraid that you won't be able to return after giving it to me? Suanna said indifferently, it's not that the Brahmin sect is a sore loser. A loss is a loss. We'll see the results in the future. Today I have come according to the Daluotian rules. Everyone here is here. Are you still going to disregard the Daluotian rules? This bell is the treasure of the Brahmin sect, the soul return bell. It is capable of both offense and defense. When the bell is rung, it can shake the opponent's soul. A low-level martial artist's soul can be directly shattered by the bell's sound. It can be used as a defense. As long as one stays within 100 feet of the soul return bell, no primordial spirit mystic arts will be able to corrode the martial artist inside. This bell is a congratulatory gift, but if Cult Master Chu wants to take it away smoothly, then you'll have to follow my rules. Cult Master Chu, you've won the 3 battles. The soul return bell is the congratulatory gift from the Brahmin sect to Cult Master Chu. There are so many sects here, but none of their gifts are as important as my soul return bell. Suddenly, Suanna saw the Earth Jiao's corpse that hadn't been completely dragged away. He quickly added, the barbarians don't count. They aren't from the Daluotian sect. Cult Master Chu, if you lose one of these 3 battles, I won't take the soul return bell away. Naturally, the Brahmin sect will not take back what we have given. But your Kunlun devil cult's mountain gate can only be 3 feet tall. Do you dare to accept this battle? For any sect, their mountain gate was their facade. The bigger and more glorious it was, the better. A mountain gate of only 3 feet tall was not even comparable to a small sect. To the Kunlun devil cult, it was even more humiliating. But Chu Xiu still didn't understand. Had the Brahmin sect lost their minds? How dare they send such a small group of people to cause trouble here? At this moment, Zhong Qiushui seemed to have noticed that something was wrong with Chu Xiu. It seemed like he really didn't know about this. Therefore, Zhong Qiushui hurriedly explained, the Brahmin sect really isn't causing trouble on purpose. They're just following the Daluotian rules. After so many years, there were many sects that rose after the Daluotian, but if you want to gain the recognition of the other old sects, you naturally have to show a certain level of strength. Therefore, at this time, some people sent extremely precious congratulatory gifts, but they also put forward some conditions to make things difficult. Master can accept it or not, but most sects will accept it. Because if you don't accept it, where will the face of a new sect be? Chu Xiu raised his eyebrows slightly. What kind of bullsh**t rule was this? In his opinion, the person who set this rule must be an ancient sect that couldn't afford to lose. These ancient sects that had been passed down for tens of thousands of years, most of them harbored an extremely arrogant mentality, as if they looked down on the rising stars. However, strength didn't depend on who had been passed down for a long time. Therefore, some sects must have been attacked by the latecomers. In a moment of anger, they came up with this bullsh**t rule. In fact, they were indignant about losing and wanted to embarrass the other party during the founding ceremony to regain some face. When Cold River City was founded, and not long ago when the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy was founded, did such a thing happen? Zhong Qiushui shook his head and said, no. When Cold River City was founded, we already knew that we couldn't stop the rise of Cold River City. It was useless to discuss the other party and it would only make us look petty. Therefore no one suggested it. As for when the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy was founded, they didn't even have an enemy. Meng Xinghe has been keeping a low profile for so many years. Moreover, he is a supreme expert of the 9 heavens. Under the circumstances where there is no life and death enmity, who would dare to find trouble with the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy? This time, it seems that you have really hurt the Sanskrit sect so much that they hate you so much that they are gnashing their teeth. Therefore they won't let go of any opportunity to take revenge and vent their anger. Seeing that Chu Xiu didn't say a word for a long time, Suana sneered and said, "Why? Does Cult Master Chu not dare to agree? It doesn't matter if you don't agree anyway? Agree. Since it's a Daluotian rule inheritance, why not agree? Send your people up." Chu Xiu directly interrupted Suhana's words. Hearing Chu Xiu agree, most of the sects present showed a look of interest in their eyes. Because they hadn't seen such a scene for a long time, and some of them hadn't seen it in their entire lives. In fact, there were only 3 sects that had risen in the recent hundreds of years. One was Cold River City. Both the High Heaven sect and the Imperial Sky Pavilion recognized each other's position. Moreover, these 2 sects were very generous in their conduct and didn't use such means. The other one was Great Thousand Sect. However, Great Thousand Sect was good at spirit arrays, artifact refining and other miscellaneous things, so they weren't a big threat. On the contrary, they cooperated with many sects, so naturally no one would make things difficult for them. As for the Galaxy Martial Arts Academy, Zhong Qiushui had already explained the reason, so no one dared to make things difficult for a 9th heaven existence. Therefore this was the first time Chu Xiu and the Sanskrit sect had seen such a scene. The cultivators and small forces in the Eastern Territory who were preparing to join the Kunlun Devil cult were also watching the situation very carefully. Before this, they had always known that the Kunlun Devil cult was very strong, and that Chu Xiu was very strong. However, except for those who had really come into contact with the Kunlun Devil cult like the 9 Phoenix Sword sect, the others basically only heard about it from hearsay. They hadn't seen the strength of the Kunlun Devil cult with their own eyes. Therefore this time they could also make one last judgment and one last choice before joining the Kunlun Devil cult. Some of the people present also noticed Ji Kong and Fa Jing. They suddenly realized that the alliance between Heavenly Luo Treasure Buddha and Chu Xiu didn't seem to be that close. The Sanskrit sect came to find trouble and brought up the Daluotian rules. Whether Chu Xiu would respond or not, as an ally, Heavenly Luo Treasure Buddha should have reprimanded them. However, apart from pointing out Suhana's identity, Ji Kong didn't say anything else. This was a little thought-provoking. At this time, Grandmaster Yuan Ji and Chao Ying had also cleaned up the square and set up the spirit array. At this moment, the originally somewhat festive ceremony was filled with a somber atmosphere. Chapter 1345. Suana wanted to take advantage of the ceremony to attack the prestige of a new force like Kunlun Devil cult, but he didn't know that Chu Xiu had the same idea at this time. Kunlun Devil cult had just been established, so he had to give everyone a little confidence. Chu Xiu's strength was strong enough, and the battle record of destroying Vishnu Temple was also strong enough, but the only thing he lacked now was the opportunity to show his strength in front of everyone. After all, what you hear may be false, but seeing is believing. Suana called out an extremely young and handsome young martial artist, and he said in a deep voice, "Saduo, you go for the first battle. Cult Master Chu, send a real pellet state martial artist to fight." Although the Sanskrit cult had not seen Chu Xiu's strength directly, he could kill Indra, which could already prove a lot of things. So this time when the Sanskrit cult sent Suana to find trouble with Chu Xiu, he didn't want to directly attack Chu Xiu, but he attacked his subordinates. They didn't believe that if Chu Xiu was strong, the strength of his subordinates would be as strong as him. Chu Xiu turned his gaze to Chu Wuji. Among the real pellet state martial artists, choose one who can fight. At Chu Xiu's current position, he really didn't know much about the real pellet state martial artists under him. Chu Wuji had been in charge of these things in the Daluotian and the mortal realm for a long time, so he knew more about these things than Chu Xiu. However, Chu Wuji also scratched his head and said to Tangya, "Do you have anyone under you who can fight?" Although Chu Wuji knew more about the martial artists under him than Chu Xiu, he didn't know the strength of each person very thoroughly. On the contrary, Tangya, the hall master of Kunlun Devil cult who often fought on the front line, definitely knew more. But before Tangya could speak, someone said, "Sect Master, let me fight this battle. I definitely won't lose." The person who suddenly spoke was actually the martial artist who had been guarding the door. At this moment, his entire body was filled with a murderous aura, and his anger was like a volcanic eruption. Today was their holy cult's founding ceremony. It was such a good day. The fact that he was sent to guard the door meant that he represented the Kunlun Devil cult. In the end, he didn't handle the Jiang family's trouble well. Although Tanya settled it in the end, he still felt a little embarrassed. Furthermore, the Sanskrit sect had ignored him and barged in just now, which made him even more furious. Now he was even willing to disregard the rules and take the initiative to challenge Lin Fan. Chu Xiu looked at Tanya, and when he saw Tanya lightly nodding his head, Chu Xiu faintly said, "All right then, I'll leave this battle to you." However, today is a joyous day for my Kunlun devil cult. Hearing that the sect master nodded in agreement, the martial artist replied excitedly, "Sect master, don't worry. I know the rules. It's not good to see blood on a joyous day. I will pay attention." Chu Xiu squinted his eyes and said, "Wrong, why can't there be blood? Someone took the initiative to sacrifice himself. Of course, the more blood the better." Suanna sneered. This Chu Xiu is really arrogant. He actually sent a disciple to guard the door to fight with the Sanskrit sect. Does he think that I will send an ordinary disciple here? The real pellet state martial artist of the Sanskrit sect walked out with a disdainful smile on his handsome face. Sanskrit sect Brahma Heaven Temple, Deity Palace Master Sadhuo, the direct disciple of the Deity Palace Master, report your name. There are at least 80 martial artists of the same rank who died in my hands, but there are no nameless people. The Deity Palace was the strongest palace among the Brahma Heaven Temple. Even the previous Brahma Heaven Temple masters were mostly from the Deity Palace. As the direct disciple of the Deity Palace Master, the other party must be an outstanding talent among the younger generation of the Sanskrit sect. The disciple guarding the door said coldly, "Kunlun devil cult Blood Fang Hall Li Qian followed the sect master to experience more than 10 battles, from innate realm to real pellet state. He has killed more than 1,000 martial artists of the same rank." As soon as these words came out, everyone present looked at Li Qian with a strange gaze. This disciple of the Kunlun devil cult is probably bragging, right? Killing martial artists of the same rank and killing people were two different concepts. If you used real pellet state to kill innate realm, it was called a massacre, not a fight. Therefore, killing more than 1,000 martial artists of the same rank meant that he had experienced thousands of fierce battles of the same rank. Killing innate realm with innate realm, killing innate realm with unity of man and nature, killing real pellet state with real pellet state. In this kind of fierce battle of the same rank, it was already quite strong and lucky to be able to survive. He could actually kill thousands of people? How is this possible? However, Chu Xiu knew that other disciples of the Kunlun devil cult also knew that Li Qian was not lying. He really had such a record. This Li Qianli belonged to the Blood Fang Hall. He was previously an assassin in the Heavenly Sin branch of the Blue Dragon Society, and he had rich fighting experience. Later he had been following Chu Xiu and experienced more than 10 battles. Now that he was standing here alive, it was not surprising that he had such a record. Sadhuo sneered, "Records are earned by fighting, not by bragging." As Sadhuo's voice fell, a hazy chaotic mist suddenly appeared around him. The chaotic mist twisted and evolved behind him, turning into 4 arms. Each arm held a weapon evolved from the chaotic mist, a sword, a spear, and a hammer. They were lifelike. Everyone present gently nodded their heads. The disciple of the Sanskrit sect was really extraordinary. A real pellet state could transform the aura into such a lifelike form. It could be seen that the other party's strength was strong and his control of aura. But in the next moment, Li Qian's body suddenly burst out with boundless blood qi. The blood qi burned violently, merging with the demonic qi around him. His whole body turned into a black and red blade, striking at Sadhuo with the momentum to cut through everything. Everyone present raised their eyebrows. Are the disciples of the Kunlun devil cult all crazy? He actually burned his blood essence as soon as he came up. Sadhuo was also taken aback. Although his combat experience was not as much as Li Qian's, he had also fought many fierce battles with the monks of the Heavenly Luo Treasure Temple. However, he had never seen such a wild martial artist. He went all out as soon as he came up. What kind of routine was this? Using a human as a blade, the sharp and powerful force was lifelike. Sadhuo had to take a defensive position, holding the opponent's figure with his 4 arms behind him. There was a loud explosion and the aura dispersed. The boundless blood qi tore through the chaotic mist. Sato hurriedly made hand seals, and the supreme heavenly god seal of the heavenly deity palace came crashing down, pressing down on Li Qian's body, causing him to groan. But he resisted the urge to vomit blood, and instead condensed a sharper black and red blood blade in his hand, pressing it toward Sadhuo's neck. The demonic blade condensed from the powerful power of qi and blood, and demonic qi was extremely sharp, slowly cutting through Sato's shield of Dipper. However, Sadr was also controlling the paramount heavenly god seal to descend. The immense pressure even made Li Qian's bones creak. If this continued, the supreme god seal would definitely crush Li Qian into pieces, and Sadr would also have his throat slit by the blade, perishing together with Li Qian. Saduo had never encountered such a weird fighting style. He was already forced into a desperate situation before he even had time to use his Sanskrit mystic arts. He couldn't help but curse, "Madman! You are a madman. Why are you risking your life in a duel?" The look in Li Qian's eyes did not change at all, and it was extremely cold. This made Saduo realize that the other party really wanted to die together with him. He was the direct disciple of the divine god temple's palace lord, a direct descendant of the Sanskrit, and his future was limitless. But the other party was just a gatekeeper disciple of the Kunlun devil cult. It was not worth it even if he crushed the other party. Saduo did not want to die, at least he did not want to die together with a gatekeeper. "Madman. You may want to die but I don't." With a curse, Saduo suddenly retracted the supreme heaven god seal, and all the chaotic mist around him condensed in front of him, completely blocking Li Qian's blood blade, not letting it advance an inch. But at this moment, Li Qian, who had not spoken a word, suddenly opened his mouth, and a blood arrow mixed with boundless demonic chi suddenly burst out from his mouth. Saduo's strength was used to block the blood blade, and he was caught off guard, directly blasting his head into pieces. In an instant, red and white fluid splattered everywhere, and the headless body fell to the ground, staining the square red with blood. With a pale face, Li Qian limped to Chu Xiu, knelt on one knee, cupped his fists and said, "I'm glad I didn't disappoint you." Chu Xiu nodded gently and said, "Not bad, you didn't disgrace the devil cult." Chu Xiu's praise made Li Qian, who was also badly injured, ecstatic, as if the injuries on his body had lightened a little. There were not many disciples in the entire Kunlun devil cult who could be praised by the sect leader. Tangya walked over and patted his shoulder saying, "Boy, not bad. Not only did you not disgrace the devil cult, but you also did not disgrace the Blood Fang Hall. But remember, next time don't be so desperate. You can beat him in another way. You don't even have a woman to die like this, do you think it's worth it?" Li Qian blushed and patted his chest. "The disciples of the devil cult are born to fight, they don't need women." Tangya suddenly patted his head, looked back at Yen Bugue and said discontentedly, "This kid has been following you all the time, right? Look at what you've taught people to be like. What a sin." Yen Bugue tilted his head and looked at Tangya like he was looking at an idiot. He was too lazy to speak. The atmosphere on the side of Kunlun devil cult was very relaxed, but everyone present was silent. Li Qian, a real pellet state martial artist, was not worthy of their surprise, but a random disciple of Kunlun devil cult had such strength, such murderous intent, and such ruthless and decisive means. This was terrifying. One Li Qian was not terrifying, but 100 or 1,000 Li Qian were terrifying. Suhana's eyes were already extremely gloomy at this time. The palace master of Divine Palace was also a martial immortal. He asked for his disciple but he died here. After returning, that guy would definitely find trouble with him. Suana looked at the people he brought and said in a deep voice, "Li Jiqi, you will go for this battle. Remember, don't underestimate the enemy." The young man named Li Jiqi stood up and said, "Master, please rest assured that our Sanskrit cult will win this battle." Originally, Suana did not intend to let his disciple come for the second battle. But Li Qian's strength made him realize that the water of Kunlun devil cult was too deep. Just in case, he directly pushed his disciple out. Chapter 1346. Suhana's disciple had the strength of the true fire spiritual refinement state, so the Kunlun devil cult was also going to send a true fire spiritual refinement state warrior. Tangya chuckled and said, "Everyone, it's my Bloodtooth Hall's turn to be in the limelight today. Leave it to me." The others shrugged their shoulders and did not say anything. Tangya and Yen Bugue's strength was already infinitely close to the heaven and earth mysterious opening realm, so it was safest for the two of them to go. Now that Tangya had spoken, Yen Bugue would definitely not fight with him. With the previous example, Li Jiqi was much more cautious this time. Without much nonsense, his body shone with the five-colored divine light, looking extremely dazzling in an instant. Tangya sneered and said, "It's so gorgeous, like a peacock spreading its tail. Are you asking for a puppet?" Li Jiqi said angrily, "Cut the crap." As soon as he said that, the five-colored divine light attacked Tangya. Within the five-colored divine light, there were 5 different attributes of Gang Qi intertwining. Each of them reinforced and restrained each other, evolving into more changes in power. It was extremely strange. But at this moment, Tanya sneered and began to circle around him. In an instant, countless hidden weapons shot out from his side. Bone-piercing nails, heart-piercing arrows, dragon-tailed darts, plum needles, bone crusher. There were countless hidden weapons densely packed together, like a dark cloud covering the sky. Concealed weapons were something that only low-level martial artists would use. Even some low-level martial artists from large sects wouldn't use them because it was too degrading. This disciple of the Kunlun devil cult had already reached the true fire spiritual refinement state, yet he was still using hidden weapons as his main attack method. How lacking was his cultivation technique. However, some of the strong warriors present raised their eyebrows as if they had seen something. The hidden weapons that Tanya had shot out were not as simple as stellar energy attached to the hidden weapons. Each hidden weapon seemed to be connected to Tanya by a thread. These hidden weapons were not individual but a whole. Thinking of this, the expressions of the people present had already changed. How many hidden weapons were there? There were tens of thousands of them. It was almost impossible to count. However, Tanya was able to control all of them. Just how strong was his control over his power chi? Li Ziqi did not notice this. The five-colored divine light in his hands swept out. Immediately, a large pile of hidden weapons fell to the ground. Insignificant tricks, what a joke. Just as Li Ziqi sneered, he heard Suana shout, "Be careful." Li Ziqi was stunned, but it was already too late. Countless hidden weapons filled the air, completely enveloping Li Ziqi. At the same time, the threads of stellar energy on the hidden weapons grew thicker and thicker, becoming visible to everyone. Countless threads connected to Tanya's hands. As Tanya's hands formed a seal, he lightly spat out a word, "Break." In the blink of an eye, the countless threads tightened, and an incomparably violent explosion of earth chi and the sound of flesh being torn apart came from the entire field. In the next moment, a large amount of blood flowed out from the ground. Tanya waved his hand and all the hidden weapons returned to his hand. It's shameful to waste it. These hidden weapons of mine are not disposable. When Tanya retracted the hidden weapons in his hand, everyone then saw the situation in the field. It should be said that there was nothing wrong. Li Ziqi's entire body had been completely torn into a pile of minced meat. He could not even put his body back together. The expression on Sahana's face was already extremely furious, but he was holding back and did not explode. Actually, Suana was in a difficult position now. The Sanskrit's original intention was to use the Daluotian rules to embarrass Chu Xiu. At the very least, they could not allow Chu Xiu to establish a sect and live so freely. In the end, two people on their side had died consecutively. Both of them were outstanding disciples of the younger generation. Now it was the Sanskrit's turn to feel uncomfortable. Therefore the other disciples were also staring at Suana. Should they still make a move? Suana clenched his teeth fiercely. "Mantu, you do it this time." Mantu was a burly man with a bare upper body and countless runes carved on it. He had the cultivation of the heaven and earth mystic realm. He was not someone from the Brahma temple. Instead, he was the palace master of Shiva temple's beast lord divine palace. The battle prowess of a cultivator from Shiva temple was extremely shocking. At the very least, there were not many cultivators from the Brahma temple who could defeat him. However, when they saw this scene, the people on Chu Xiu's side all revealed puzzled smiles. In terms of the heaven and earth mystic realm, the people on Chu Xiu's side were the strongest. Shang Tianliang had not become a martial immortal, but he was still at the heaven and earth mystic realm. As for the remaining people, Lu Jianghe, Mei Qinglian, Chu Wuji, Lu Fengxian and the others, they were also at the heaven and earth mystic realm. None of them were to be trifled with. It could be said that any one of them would be enough to deal with the other party. Therefore, the few of them actually started modestly giving way to each other. Shang Tianliang curled his lips and said, "He's not even a half-step martial immortal. How boring. You youngsters go ahead." Mei Qinglian had a look of disdain and said, "He's too ugly. It'll affect my mood. I'm not going." Lu Jianghe took a few glances at him and shook his head. He said, "He looks quite strong. However, he's a bit fat. He doesn't have enough blood energy." Chu Wuji sighed and said, "I've been busy helping Old Wei. I'm exhausted. I'll leave the fighting to you all." Seeing that no one wanted to fight, Lu Fengxian revealed a gentle smile and said, "Very well, leave it to me." After saying that, Lu Fengxian dragged Halberd, who was in his hand, to the center of the stage. The Beast Lord Divine Palace's palace master, Mantu, was already infuriated by his opponent's words. His opponent's tone was as if he was trash and they couldn't be bothered to fight. When he saw the handsome LV Fengxian, who wasn't too tall or big, step forward, he immediately roared, "Pretty boy, die." As the sound of his voice faded, the illusory figures behind him merged into his body. There were dragons, war elephants, lions, and so on. The roars of beasts shook the heavens. Every step they took seemed to cause the entire earth to rumble. Lu Fengxian shook his head lightly. In the next moment, demonic flames soared into the sky and powerful demonic aura encircled his body. It was as if he was wearing a battle armor made entirely of demonic aura. 9 Heaven's demonic golden body. Wielding the ancient halberd in his hand, a gigantic demonic silhouette appeared behind LV Fengxian. As his halberd slashed down, the powerful force was enough to shatter mountains and shatter rocks, causing an ear-piercing explosion to ring out in the air. Boom. With a loud boom, Man 2 was directly smashed to the ground by the halberd. He couldn't help but spit out a mouthful of blood and looked at Lu Fengxian in disbelief. How could this skinny pretty boy be able to explode with such great power? He roared angrily and the countless images of wild beasts around him surged towards Lu Fengxian. However, Lu Fengxian still slashed down with his halberd. Everything was crushed in the face of absolute power. When Lu Fengxian's third halberd fell, Man 2 could no longer withstand it. Both his arms were shattered. His physical body was strong, but Lu Fengxian's power was even stronger. Seeing that Lu Fengxian's fourth halberd was about to fall, Sohana's expression changed and he hurriedly tried to stop it. The first 2 people who attacked were from the Brahma temple. Even if they died, he believed that Lord Renaga would understand. However, Man 2 was from the Shiva temple. If that lunatic Yanma knew that he had killed the palace master under him, this matter wouldn't be settled so easily. However, at this moment, Chu Xiu's right hand moved. The 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet let out a shrill sound of the primordial spirit trembling. Sohana's primordial spirit was immediately impacted and his body stopped. It was during this pause that Lu Fengxian's fourth halberd fell. Her power and aura erupted to the peak. The unparalleled halberd directly split Man 2 into 2, and the square was instantly filled with blood. Chu Xiu. Suana roared. The anger and killing intent in his eyes could no longer be concealed. At this moment he couldn't wait to fight with Chu Xiu. However, he also knew that this was the Kunlun devil cult, Chu Xiu's headquarters. If he fought here he had almost no chance of winning. After a while Suana said coldly, Good. Chu Xiu, you're very good. I'll give you the soul retrieval bell. Take good care of it. Sooner or later the Brahmin church will personally take it back. After saying that, Suana was about to leave. However, Chu Xiu said coldly, Do you think the Kunlun devil cult is a place where you can come and go as you please? I'm not interested in this soul retrieval bell. It's better to give it back to the Brahmin church. It doesn't matter if you give it back sooner or later. Why don't I send you off now? As soon as Chu Xiu's voice fell, he actually used the law embodiment of heaven and earth, grabbed the soul retrieval bell and threw it at Suana. No one expected that Chu Xiu would actually make a move and use his mystique. Suana didn't expect it either. 5-colored divine radiance shone behind him. The power of the 5 elements combined and disintegrated any power in heaven and earth. The soul retrieval bell exploded amidst the clash between Suana and Chu Xiu's power. However, Suana was also sent flying. When Suhana's 5-colored divine radiance was cultivated to its peak, it was indeed capable of disintegrating any power. After all, no power in heaven and earth could escape the range of the power of the 5 elements. However, his 5-colored divine radiance was unable to disintegrate the purest power of the law embodiment of heaven and earth. The 3 punches landed and the entire ground trembled. Suana was in an extremely sorry state. Seeing that Qinqing Di and Wei Shuya were about to make a move, Suhana's body immediately erupted with several rays of light that soared into the sky. The 5-colored light fused into one and, like a rainbow bridge, swept up the other disciples of the Brahmin church and rapidly left. Suana was, after all, a 6th-level martial immortal. Putting aside his battle prowess, at the very least, his foundation of power was stronger than Chu Xiu's. Chu Xiu had the confidence to fight against Suana. However, if Suana was bent on escaping, there was nothing he could do to stop Suana. Suana wasn't a fool like Yin Tuoyuo, who would not escape even if he couldn't win. Instead, he would fight recklessly, unwilling to admit defeat even if he were to die. Chapter 1347. In fact, Chu Xiu's attack on Suha just now was somewhat against the rules. According to the Daluotian rules of the past, if someone came to make things difficult for you when you were establishing a sect, it was fine if you endured it. After all, it was a joyous occasion, and it was better to forgive people wherever possible. However, Chushio was not that kind of person. Whoever made him unhappy, he would make them even more unhappy. Rules were made by people. The so-called Daluotian rules were just something created by a sect that could not afford to lose. Chushio had never cared about it. With his current strength and the strength of the entire Kunlun devil cult, even if he temporarily disregarded the rules, what could anyone do to him? Sure enough, when the people present saw Chushio's attack, although they were surprised, no one stood up to say anything. Glancing at the blood on the square around him, Chushio waved his hand and said, "Wash the ground." After a group of Kunlun devil cult martial artists cleaned up the square that was stained with blood at an extremely fast speed. Only then did Chushio put on a kind smile as if nothing had happened. He said to the crowd, "Everyone, please don't mind it. There will always be some thieves who can't bear to see others do well. They just have to jump out and cause trouble on a joyous occasion. However, it doesn't matter. The noise of a fly is not a big deal. Now that the annoying fellows are gone, the ceremony will continue." Chushio's expression turned solemn and he said in a deep voice, "The path of martial arts is rugged and long. Establishing a sect is to pass on the legacy, and also to gather everyone's strength to reach the peak of martial arts. My Kunlun devil cult educates without discrimination. As long as you have a heart for martial arts and want to reach the peak, you can join the cult. We practice martial arts and obtain power not to control the fate of others, but to prevent our own fate from being controlled by others." As soon as Chushio's words came out, it immediately attracted the resonance of many small sections. For these small sects that were not strong and not too big in scale, they were sandwiched in the middle of the big sections. Although they looked very impressive on normal days, in reality, they could not control their own fate. Usually, a single decision made by those top sects would affect the future of their sections. Chushio's words struck a chord in their hearts. Chushio scanned the crowd and said in a deep voice, "Activate the sacred flame." As soon as Chushio's voice fell, Grandmaster Yuanji and Chao Heng opened the array formation. Suddenly, the rootless sacred fire rushed up. In that instant, the martial artists from the small sects and schools felt that the might of the Kunlun demon cult was very strong. Although they did not feel anything abnormal, the expressions of the martial immortal level experts all changed. They could feel the power within the rootless sacred flame. It was the purest form of heaven and earth energy. This kind of thing was a treasure among treasures no matter where it was placed. For example, High Heaven sect's Soaring Heaven Boundless Seal was similar, but the Soaring Heaven Boundless Seal was only refined from a part of the dragon vein, so in terms of real power, it was not comparable to the rootless sacred flame. At this sect founding ceremony, Chushio could be said to have given many people a surprise. His own strength did not need to be mentioned. He was able to kill Yin Tuoyuo. Regardless of Chushio's realm, his combat power had at least reached between the 5th and 7th heavenly layers. The 3 battles just now also demonstrated the strength of the Kunlun devil cult's cultivators. They were definitely the cream of the crop among cultivators of the same level. They were the elites of the elites and had a huge force. Now that the rootless sacred flame appeared, it meant that Chushio truly had the qualifications to become one of the top sects in the 4 domains. He had a heaven and earth divine object of his own. This kind of trump card could only be encountered by chance. For example, Cold River City was not weak, but they did not have such a thing. So, if their strength weakened in the future, they could only be destroyed. However, sects like High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion also had trump cards similar to the rootless sacred flame and used them. In the future, when their strength declined, they could still use it as a deterrent to perish together with their enemies. These 3 surprises were enough to make the newly established Kunlun devil cult a top sect in the eastern domain that could stand shoulder to shoulder with High Heaven Sect. After that, Chushio directly announced the start of the banquet. However, most of the people at the banquet ate tasteless food. They all ate hastily and left immediately after, going back to report the situation. Only that Longshan of the Luoshan tribe was still there, eating. In fact, he even finished all the ingredients prepared by the Kunlun demon sect for the grand establishment ceremony. Only then did he reluctantly allow Xiao Wu to drag him away. The other outsiders had all left. The remaining cultivators from the small sects in the eastern domain and the rogue cultivators were still standing there. They looked at each other, not knowing what to say. At this time, Lin Fengwu suddenly stood up and bowed to Chushio. My 9 Phoenix Sword sect is willing to merge with Kunlun devil cult and become its vassal sect. This subordinate is also willing to join Kunlun devil cult and cut through thorns and thorns for Kunlun devil cult. I am willing to die 10,000 times for Kunlun Devil Cult. A smile appeared on Chu Xiu's face. Very good. From now on, your 9 Phoenix Sword sect can erect the sacred flame flag of my Kunlun Devil Cult. In the future, your 9 Phoenix Sword sect will be a vassal sect of my Kunlun Devil Cult. I also know your strength. You can directly join Kunlun Devil Cult and choose any hall to cultivate. All cultivation methods and resources will be given to official disciples of Kunlun Devil Cult. Seeing that Lin Fengwu stood up and even received praise from Chu Xiu and this level of treatment, some of the sect leaders present immediately slapped their thighs in regret. They had only hesitated for a moment, but they did not expect this girl to beat them to it. However, some of the martial artists from Fanglin County present sneered. It was useless even if they beat her to it. She was old friends with Cult Master Chu. Even if she was the last one, she would still receive this treatment. However, with the 9 Phoenix Sword sect taking the lead, the other martial artists also bowed their heads and worshipped, eager to join Kunlun Devil Cult. These things were too complicated, so Chu Xiu directly threw them to Elder Wei and the others to deal with. Anyway, they had experience in dealing with these basic things. As the cult master, it was better for him to maintain a cold attitude. The things that happened at Kunlun Devil Cult's founding ceremony spread throughout the Daluotian in a very short time. 3 wins, Chu Xiu's strong attitude, and the trump card that Kunlun Devil Cult revealed, all of these proved that Kunlun Devil Cult was not as simple as a simple newly established sect. Its power and foundation were comparable to those top sects that had been passed down for more than 10,000 years. Moreover, it did not have any sectarian bias, and its attitude of not rejecting anyone made it more attractive to those martial artists who were originally rogue cultivators and from small sections. This also led to many rogue cultivators from the southern and northern regions specifically coming to the eastern region to join Kunlun Devil Cult. Of course, there was no such thing in the western region. The group of monks was only divided into 2 factions. Unless they could no longer survive in the western region, they would never switch to other sections. Stargazing Pavilion, Northern Sky Pillar Mountain. At this moment, Fang Daochen, revered Qingwei, was telling Meng Xinghe in detail about the various things that happened when Kunlun Devil Cult was established. In the end, Fang Daochen concluded, I feel that Chu Xiu has already discovered the secret of destiny. When I congratulated him, I deliberately used the word, destiny, to test him. Although he did not show any abnormal reaction, I could feel that there was a slight change in his state of mind at that moment. Although it was only a very slight change in my perception, it was like ripples on a lake, extremely obvious. However, Chu Xiu did not pose much of a threat to us. He actually announced in public that not only rogue cultivators can join the Kunlun Devil Cult, but those small families and small sects can also join the Kunlun Devil Cult. At this point, Fang Daochen laughed coldly and said, others may not know what those small sects and families are like, but do you think I don't know? Each and every one of them is a fence-sitter. As long as the Kunlun Devil Cult starts to decline, they will definitely be the first to run away. Meng Xinghe said lightly, actually, it is not surprising that Chu Xiu knows about the secret of destiny. I believe that many people already know about it. The Brahmin cult's leader knows about it, the world's revered one knows about it, and the Tao's revered one even knows about it. Fang Daochen asked doubtfully, then why didn't they make a move to snatch the destiny? Because the destiny is in their hands, why would they want to snatch it? Meng Xinghe waved his hand and drew countless rays of starlight in the air. He pointed at a ray of light and said, this is the Taoist sect's destiny, which is already in the hands of the Tao's revered one. If he wants to fight for the destiny of the entire Daluotian sect, then he must defeat everyone and become the true number 1 Daluotian expert. But he can't do it now, so what's the point of fighting for it? Don't place too much importance on destiny. Those who can reach the pinnacle are not chosen by destiny, but because destiny can only choose you. We are already a step behind, so we have to work hard to catch up. Fang Daochen nodded in understanding. But at this moment, Meng Xinghe suddenly said, but you said that Chu Xiu was wrong to annex those small sections. I don't agree with that. This move of Chu Xiu's is the biggest threat to my Galaxy Martial Arts Academy. Fang Daochen was stunned and asked, why? Meng Xinghe said coolly, what you said is right. Those small sects have no standpoint and are all some opportunists. But with Chu Xiu's power and influence now, do they have the chance to be opportunists? Do they dare to be two-sided? They don't dare. So as long as Chu Xiu is around, they will listen to him. Their own destiny is in the hands of Chu Xiu. 10,000 years is too long. The great calamity is coming, so we can only seize the day. I can't see what the future holds. Chu Xiu is a smart man. He has already grasped the present in his hands. Fang Daochun's eyes widened. Then what should we do? Chu Xiu is such a big threat. Do we need to call for the Ancient Venerables Assembly and use the various rules of the Ancient Venerables to deal with him? Meng Xinghe waved his hand and dispersed all the starlight in front of him. He said, "There's no need. Because right now there are people who can't wait for him to die." At the same time, on the sky-piercing sword peak of the World Sword Sect. After Mu Baishuang returned from the Kunlun Devil Cult, he saw Luo Shan and said, "Sect Master, I suggest that we immediately attack the eastern region and eradicate the Kunlun Devil Cult." Chapter 1348. Mu Baishuang made such a choice not because he hated Chu Xiu, but because he was in a hurry. As long as Chu Xiu was not eliminated and the Kunlun Devil Cult existed, the sword sects would not be able to touch the east region. Luo Shan looked at Mu Baishuang calmly and asked, "What did you see? What's the reason?" Mu Baishuang, who had always been a man of few words, told Luo Shan everything he saw in the Kunlun Devil Cult in detail. In the end, Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu is not strong enough to make the sword sects and the south region fear him. However, his rate of growth was simply too shocking. The Kunlun Devil Cult is in the south region. If we don't get rid of them, the southern region will never be able to touch the east region." Luo Shan looked at Mu Baishuang in surprise. "It's rare to see you so afraid of someone." Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "Chu Xiu is worth being afraid of. Of course, if the southern region doesn't want to touch the east region, no matter how strong Chu Xiu is, we don't need to be afraid of him." Luo Shan shook his head and said, "It seems that your thoughts are very similar." Mu Baishuang was stunned. "Us? Who else?" Luo Shan didn't say anything. He just waved his hand and an old man in a blue robe walked into the hall. "City Lord Yi." Mu Baishuang was shocked. He didn't expect to see Yi Weikong here. That's right, the person in front of them was the city lord of Cold River City, Yi Weikong, who hadn't appeared in the pugilistic world for a long time. When Chu Xiu held the founding ceremony and the entire Daluo heaven came to congratulate him, Yi Weikong had already come to the sword sect of the southern region alone. The reason for this was self-evident. Yi Weikong said indifferently, "Sword Lord Mu, do you only feel that Chu Xiu is worth being afraid of now? Unfortunately, it's too late." Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "It's not too late. It's just right. City Lord Yi, are you going to abandon the east region?" Yi Weikong suddenly roared with laughter, and his laughter was filled with rage and unwillingness. "Betray the eastern region? What a joke, what a joke. The East Territory belongs to the High Heaven Sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion, but it doesn't belong to my Cold River City. It was never mine, so why would I abandon it?" When Chu Xiu sent out the invitations and invited the 4 regions to attend the ceremony, Yi Weikong had already arrived at the sword sect of the world. In fact, although Yi Weikong had been lying low and recuperating in Cold River City because of Chu Xiu, he didn't have the idea of betraying the East region and joining hands with the martial arts world of the South region. It was none other than Chu Xiu who caused him to have such thoughts. It was Chu Xiu's decision to establish the Kunlun Devil Cult that caused Yi Weikong's mentality to become unbalanced. He was angry, unwilling, and even deeply jealous of Chu Xiu. In the past, when he established Cold River City, he fought against the High Heaven Sect in the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Under the premise that he joined hands with Meng Xinghe, he snatched the food from the 2 sects and laid the foundation of Cold River City. He couldn't even remember how much the Cold River City had to pay and how many casualties it had caused. But now, why didn't the High Heaven Sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion stop or make things difficult for Chu Xiu when he established the Kunlun Devil Cult? Why did they even send him congratulatory gifts? Yi Weikong knew that it was because the times had changed. At that time, he established Cold River City because of the internal strife in the East region and to snatch food from the High Heaven Sect and the Imperial Heaven Pavilion. Now that Chu Xiu established the Kunlun Devil Cult, the 2 sects thought that it could protect the southern border's defense line and act as a barrier, so they didn't reject it. However, although Yi Weikong understood the reason, he couldn't swallow this resentment. Since the East region had never accommodated his Cold River City and treated him as one of their own, why should he do his best for the East region? The so-called East, West, South, North and South regions were nothing more than geographical names. It didn't matter which region Cold River City was in. Luo Shan said in a deep voice, "City Lord Yi made a wise choice. The sword sect of the world is very pleased. The East region can't accommodate you, but the Southern Territory can. The sword sect of the world can." Yi Weikong said coldly, "This is not a wise choice. I was forced to make it. Sect Master Luo, the Cold River City will fully cooperate with the Southern Territory's attack on the East region, but I only ask for one thing." "What is it?" "Kill Chuxiu." Luo Shan paused and said, "Okay." The sword sect of the world and Chuxiu didn't have any death feud. However, due to the difference in their positions, this battle to the death could be said to have been decided. At this time, Mu Baishuang suddenly said, "Sect Master, the plan is revealed. We must succeed in this battle. But the Soaring Heaven sect has the Soaring Heaven seal, how confident are you?" Mu Baishuang's attitude was very radical before, but after seeing Luo Shan's decision to attack the East region, he suddenly became cautious. This time was different. This was the first and last time the Southern Territory sects led by the Sword Sect of the World would attack the East region with all their strength. If they succeeded, the Southern Territory sects would annex the East region and their power would increase greatly. If they lost, the Southern Territory sects would suffer a great loss, and they probably wouldn't be able to do anything in the era of great battles. So this time they had to be very cautious. Luo Shan said indifferently, "Don't worry. I'm prepared to deal with the Soaring Heaven seal. I've integrated the Through Heaven sword." Hearing this, Mu Baishuang's expression changed. The Through Heaven sword was the inheritance treasure of the sword sect of the world. Its origin was actually the same as the Soaring Heaven seal. It was made from a piece of fine iron born from the dragon vein. The Through Heaven sword existed in the lower realm. After it was brought to the Daluotian by the sword sect of the world, it was nourished on the Through Heaven sword. The Through Heaven sword could not be controlled by mortals. Moreover, the Through Heaven sword was a product of the lower realm's dragon vein, which had some conflict with the Daluotian. Every time it was used, the backlash it brought could be said to be great. Luo Shan chuckled and said, "Why such a big reaction? I've been a failure in my life. I've been the #1 sword Dao cultivator in the world for hundreds of years. The sword sect of the world went from 1 sword saint to 3 sword saints. By the way, there are 4 now. That brat Guaxia also has the title of sword saint. When it comes to understanding the world, I'm not as good as the world exalt and the Sanskrit sect master, let alone the Tao master. I can't even compare to a rising star like Meng Xinghe. My realm of the 9th heaven was forcefully broken through by relying on my drive back then. In reality, it was very difficult. Others are chasing after the peak, but I can't even see where the peak is. Now that I'm old, I can still use the Through Heaven sword while I still have the last bit of drive left. If this drags on, I might not even have the right to use the Through Heaven sword. Of course, we can't be the only ones doing this. We have to find a few more people. Brother Sheng, I'll leave Divine General Zhenlong and Supremacy Guyu to you. They already have a legacy disciple. I'm afraid they won't be so easy to persuade this time." Sheng Jiyuan walked out of the inner hall and nodded expressionlessly. "All right, give me some time. I'll bring them here." Mu Baishuang looked at all of this in a daze. So when he was still worried and apprehensive, the old sect master had already arranged everything. But why did all of this feel like he was making arrangements for his funeral? Mu Baishuang shook his head violently and said in a low voice, "Sect master, what do we do now?" Luo Shan said in a low voice, wait for everyone to arrive. I've already sent Yi Guaxia to the Great Thousand Sect and the Martial God Sect. This time, we've gathered the strength of the 3 sects of the southern region, 3 prime sovereigns, and City Lord Yi of Cold River City as our spy. If we still can't break through the eastern region, we can only say that the southern region doesn't have the luck to do so. In the dense forest deep within the 100,000 mountain range, Su Qinya and Fang Baidu looked at Xing Jiyuan in confusion in front of them. They didn't know why he had suddenly come to find them. Xing Jiyuan had already stepped into the 7th martial immortal realm. His battle strength was slightly higher than theirs. Thus, although they were on friendly terms, it wasn't too much. Moreover, Xing Jiyuan was a rather arrogant person. Most of the time, they were the ones who took the initiative to curry favor with Xing Jiyuan. This was the first time Xing Jiyuan had taken the initiative to find them. Brother Xing, it's not easy for you to come here. Come, let's take a seat in the secret realm. I've cultivated a batch of Nepenthe grass in the secret realm. The wine brewed from it can be said to be able to solve 1,000 worries with just 1 cup. Although Fang Baidu was puzzled as to why Xing Jiyuan had taken the initiative to find them, he still politely invited Xing Jiyuan to take a seat. However, Xing Jiyuan shook his head and said, I'm not here as a guest today. I'm here to invite the 2 of you to attack the eastern region and destroy the Kunlun Devil Cult, High Heaven Sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion. The 2 of you can avenge the death of your disciple. Similarly, after the sects of the southern region occupy the eastern region, the two of you can either obtain a batch of resources to cultivate in seclusion or directly establish a sect in the eastern region. Fang Baidu and Qin Jiolong looked at each other and remained silent. However, their attitudes were enough to explain everything. In the past, the enmity between them for killing their disciple was indeed irreconcilable. But now they had accepted two new disciples. They were beautiful, cute, sensible, and intelligent. Their talents were much better than the previous two, and their future achievements would even surpass theirs. To put it nicely, they now had fetters and were no longer willing to fight to the death. But to put it bluntly, they were afraid. They had been beaten so badly by Chu Xiu that they did not dare to find trouble with him. Although the two of them were not old, they were not young either. They had almost reached the end of their martial Dao cultivation in this lifetime. They could only hope for an outstanding disciple to inherit their mantle. Now that their goal had actually been achieved, why should they risk their lives to fight against a fierce person like Chu Xiu? Sheng Jiyuan frowned and said, "This time the World Sword Sect will take the lead. Sword Saint Luo Shan will take action. The Great Thousand Sect, War God Sect, and I will also take action. Even the city lord of the Eastern Territories, Cold River City, Yi Wei Kong, will be a spy. Basically, it's in the bag. What are you afraid of?" Fang Baidu smiled awkwardly and said, "We're not afraid. We just don't think it's necessary. Brother Sheng, you should find someone else." Sheng Jiyuan's expression suddenly turned cold. He said, "The two of you, the attack on the Eastern Territory and the spy from Cold River City, are all confidential for the time being? Now that you've heard these secrets, you don't want to take action?" Hearing these threatening words, Su Tianya and Fang Baidu's expressions suddenly sank. Chapter 1349. Although Sheng Jiyuan's sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage had always been a level higher than theirs and Sheng Jiyuan's strength was stronger than theirs, it did not mean they were afraid of him. Su Tianya's face turned gloomy immediately when he heard the threatening words. "Sheng Jiyuan, what do you mean? I've seen people taking revenge, but I've never seen someone forcing others to take revenge. Are you going to force us to come if we don't come? Your sword Venerable Ling Tian's lineage is indeed sharp. I would like to see if it can break through my golden dragon body." Sheng Jiyuan said faintly, "Don't get too worked up. I'm not threatening you. I'm just telling you the truth. Don't tell me the two of you haven't sensed the trend of the entire exalted heaven recently?" Meng Xinghe had just become the leader of Gu Zun's lineage and established the Galaxy Martial Academy to recruit disciples without restraint. Chu Xiu's establishment of the Kunlun Devil cult in the Eastern Territory had shaken the four territories. Now, the Southern Territory and Eastern Territory are going to war. Don't you know what this means? The era of great battles has already arrived. We Gu Zun's lineage are Gu Zun's, to put it nicely, but we're just powerful itinerant cultivators. Martial immortals. Martial immortals? You just listen when others call you that. If you really think of yourselves as immortals, you won't even know how you died. In this era of great battles, do you really think that martial immortals can stay out of trouble? Meng Xinghe must have asked you to join the Galaxy Martial Academy before, but you rejected him. Now, I'm representing the Sword Sect in the Southern Territory to find you, but you rejected me. Do you still want to join Chu Xiu's side? You and I are both Gu Zun's, so I'm here to talk to you about this matter. After all, you and I have some friendship. However, if you don't agree, I won't get involved in this matter anymore. What the Sword Sect of the world will do is not something that I can control. I can only tell you that those swordsmen are not easy to deal with. In the past, in the lower realm, the World Sword Sect had once killed 90% of their disciples and kept the elites alive. Their swords are sharp, but their hearts are even sharper and harder than their swords. After saying that, Sheng Jiyuan did not say anything else. He turned around and left. Behind him, Fang Baidu and Su Tianya's expressions changed several times. When Sheng Jiyuan's silhouette was about to disappear from their sight, Fang Baidu shouted, "Brother Sheng! Wait." Sheng Jiyuan purposely did not leave as fast as he could. A smile appeared on his cold face. In the main hall of the World Sword Sect, the current four sword honorables of the World Sword Sect were gathered. Other than Sect Master Sword Exalted Luo Shan, there was also Exalted Sword Exalted Azure Dawn Mu Baishuang, Exalted Sword Exalted Jade Sea Exalted Mingji Lan, who had just come out of seclusion, and Exalted Sword Exalted Nine Nether E Guatia, who had reached the third heavenly layer of martial immortal in the Exalted Divine Palace. On the Battle God Sect's side, the 6th Heaven Martial Immortal Sect Master Heaven Battling Hierarch Mu Shenxiao, and the temple master of the divine war temple, Sikong Jalua, had also arrived. The Great Thousand sect was slightly weaker. Only sect master Tao Qinming had come. Sheng Jiyuan had also brought Su Qinya and Fang Baidu, as well as Yi Weikong from Cold River City. There were a total of 11 martial immortals in the hall. This powerful force even gave Su Qinya and Fang Baidu, who had been a little uneasy, some confidence and comfort. Long Longer and Luo Feiheng also stood behind Fang Baidu and Su Qinya. As the two personal disciples of the Guzun, they were naturally qualified to stand here and listen in. Even Fang Qishao was there. The two of them looked at each other with a strange look in their eyes. Chu Xiu had sent them undercover so that they could gather information and act at the critical moment. They had thought that they would have to stay for a long time. They did not expect to get a chance so soon. Yi Weikong was the first to speak. Sect Master Luo, now that we are all here, what is the sword sect going to do? Anyway, Cold River City will cooperate fully. Luo Shan rubbed his head and said, I'm getting old and my brain can't keep up. I've already discussed the plan with Bai Shuang. Let him speak. Everyone present looked at each other and revealed a thoughtful expression. No matter how old Luo Shan was, he could not possibly forget the plan he had made in advance, right? It could only be said that Luo Shan was already choosing a successor, and that successor was Mu Baishuang. Therefore, Luo Shan tried to give Mu Baishuang a chance to show his face and increase his prestige in front of everyone, deliberately pushing him to the front. Of course, this was the sword sect's own business and had nothing to do with them. Mu Baishuang said, now that we've teamed up, we have a total of 11 martial immortals. Logically speaking, we should be able to crush the eastern region. However, I'm certain that if we fight them head-on, we will definitely lose. Mu Shenxiao of the Battle God sect frowned and said, aren't you overestimating the east region a little too much? Mu Baishuang shook his head and said, if we don't plan for the worst situation now, it will be too late to regret it if something unexpected happens. We will fight them directly. First, it will be easier to meet those barbarians through the southern barbaric land. After the founding ceremony of the Kunlun Devil cult, everyone knew that Chu Xiu colluded with the barbarians, and he even controlled a large barbarian tribe. Therefore, if we pass through the southern barbaric land, it will be easy to be discovered by the barbarians. Then the martial artists of the east region will be aware of it and be prepared. Even the south region is not a monolithic block. Don't forget about the Sky Devil Palace. They joined forces with Chu Xiu to destroy the Blissful Demon Palace, so they are already allies. Although I have already cleaned up the spies in the sword sect, I can't guarantee that I can clean them all. Once we move out on a large scale, it is very likely that we will be discovered. Mu Shenxiao waved his hand and said, this matter was led by the World Sword Sect. We also trust the World Sword Sect. Therefore, if you have any plans, Sword Master Mu, just tell us and we will all cooperate. Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, my plan can be summed up in one word, fast. Gather all the top forces and use the fastest speed to attack the east region, as fast as the wind and as fast as fire. And the key point of this plan lies with City Lord Yi and Brother Fang of the Cold River City. Fang Baidu said in surprise, me? Mu Baishuang nodded and said, Brother Fang, your Guyu clan has a secret technique called Shadow Shifting Moon. As long as you have the same array coordinates, you can tear the space under the moonlight and travel thousands of miles to the other side. As far as I know, the difficulty of this secret technique lies in the array coordinates that you have to set up on the other side. The array coordinates are extremely conspicuous, and it requires a lot of materials. Therefore, the Guyu clan only regards this secret technique as a quick way to return home. But here we can use City Lord Ye's Cold River City as a cover, and let City Lord Yi return to the East region first to set up the array in Cold River City. All of us will use the Shadow Shifting Moon technique to cross thousands of miles into the East region, bypass the southern barbaric land, and attack the East region with Chu Xiu. Fang Baidu wanted to say something, but in the end he just opened his mouth and didn't say anything. The other party had already studied his secret technique so thoroughly, what else could he say? In his hands, this secret technique was only used to save time, but in the hands of the other party, it was a great killing weapon that could be used to cross thousands of miles and launch a surprise attack to destroy an entire clan. This might be the difference in their horizons. Mu Baishuang continued, after entering Cold River City, we have no time to waste. We must defeat all the three forces in the East region at the same time. Among them, the High Heaven sect is the strongest, and they have the High Heaven Wuji seal. The Sword sect of the world will attack the High Heaven sect with Brother Sheng. The Imperial Sky Pavilion is already weak, but after all they still have some trump cards, so we will leave it to the War God sect and the Great Thousand sect to attack. As for the Kunlun devil cult's Chuxiu, although the other party has just established the sect, there are 3 martial immortals in the sect, and their strength should not be underestimated. City Lord Yi, I know the hatred between you and Chuxiu, so you will deal with the Kunlun devil cult. Brother Fong and Brother Su, you two will help City Lord Yi to deal with the other 2 Kunlun devil cult's martial immortals. Fong Baidu opened his mouth and wanted to say something, but in the end he still didn't say anything. In fact, he didn't want to face Chuxiu. After all, Chuxiu's strength was obvious. After several consecutive conflicts, he even had a fear of Chuxiu. But now that he had decided to attack, he naturally couldn't delay, or he would offend both sides. In the end, Mu Baishuang said in a deep voice, "Since no one has any doubts, Brother Fong, please give the method of setting up the formation coordinates to City Lord Yi. When City Lord Yi has set up the formation coordinates, we will immediately attack." After that, the crowd dispersed and began to prepare. The shadow-shifting moon secret skill of the Guyu lineage was not too high-end, because only the Guyu lineage and even Gu Zun in the martial immortal realm could use it, so it was not universal. Fong Baidu was not worried even if it spread to the entire Jianghu. Therefore he gave the secret skill to Yi Wei Kong without hesitation. When he returned to the residence that the World Sword Sect had arranged for him, he found Long Longer playing with some small insects. Fong Baidu couldn't help but frown and said, "What are these?" Long Longer smiled and said, "These are yearning cicadas. They were a pair when they were buried deep in the ground, and they will never leave each other in this life. No matter how far apart they are, the 2 cicadas can sense each other's existence. Even if there are mountains and rivers in the way, they will still find each other. Master, don't you think this is very touching?" Fong Baidu knew that Long Longer knew Gu, because she had inherited it before. However, Fong Baidu was still not used to playing with these insects. Hearing this, he just said, "It's touching, but Gu is only a minor skill. If you have time, you should practice the secret skills of the Guyu lineage. You are a girl, how can you always play with insects?" After that, Fong Baidu left directly to prepare the formation. Behind him, Long Longer had an unfathomable smile on her face, and she generously released the yearning cicada in her hand. The yearning cicada, which was refined with the Gu of the moon-worshipping cult, was extremely fast. It turned into a golden light and disappeared in an instant. Chapter 1350. Southern Barbarian Kunlun Devil Cult. Wei Shuya and the others were all present. Chu Xiu held the lovesickness cicada in his hand with a playful look in his eyes. He had told Long Longer before that Fong Baidu and Su Qinya were not a cause for concern, so there was no need to be too anxious to send him a message if something happened. But if someone was prepared to join forces to deal with him, they would most likely look for Fong Baidu and Su Qinya, the 2 ancient sovereigns who had a grudge against him. But what Chu Xiu didn't expect was that right after he established the Kunlun demon sect, there were already people preparing to act against him. Seemed like this bunch of fellows really couldn't bear to see him living a good life. Did he have to attract so much hatred? Chu Xiu took out another lovesickness cicada from the space box. The 2 lovesickness cicadas finally met and immediately hugged each other, rubbing against each other's ears and temples. The cicada wings behind them touched and let out a series of screeches, which actually converged into a human voice and told the news that Long Longer wanted to bring to Chu Xiu. After listening, Chu Xiu put away the 2 lovey-dovey lovesickness cicadas and said with a smile, "I was thinking too much. The main target of the World Sword Sect this time is not me, but the entire Eastern Territory. I am just a stepping stone for them to attack the Eastern Territory." Ji Xinlua hurriedly said, "Religion Master, even if you are a stepping stone, you are the hardest one." After Ji Xinlua surrendered to the Kunlun devil cult, he had no way out, so Chu Xiu could use him without worry. However, Chu Xiu didn't know if it was because cultivators from the Sanskrit religion received a different education from ordinary cultivators, but listening to this group of people, Chu Xiu always felt a little awkward. Just like now, Ji Xinlua was clearly trying to flatter him, but why did Chu Xiu feel so awkward listening to him? Mei Qinglian asked, "So what are you going to do now? High Heaven Sect is our primary target, should we inform High Heaven Sect first?" Chu Xiu shook his head and said, "It's too late. The World Sword Sect is thousands of miles away from my Kunlun devil cult. You all know the speed of Acacia cicada. After all, it is a voodoo. Even if it is refined by the moon-worshipping cult's secret method, its speed is only equivalent to a real pellet state martial artist. Therefore, it has already been a month since they came here from the Sword Sect of the world. I guess they have already arrived at the Cold River City and are ready to take action. Besides, even if there was enough time, why would they help High Heaven Sect? I've saved them once and I don't intend to save them again. Last time, Chu Xiu had gone to save Fang Yinglong. At that time, Chu Xiu's strength wasn't strong enough, and he didn't have enough influence. Once Fang Yinglong died, the eastern domain would definitely be plunged into the flames of war, and no one would be able to stop the sects of the southern domain. Later, High Heaven sect chose to admit the existence of the Kunlun devil cult for the same reason, which was to let the Kunlun devil cult be a barrier of the southern barbaric land and help them resist the big sects of the southern domain. In fact, there was no friendship between the two sides. Everything was just the best choice for the benefit. Now that a disaster was imminent, of course they had to rely on their own means. If High Heaven sect couldn't defend the eastern domain, his Kunlun devil cult didn't mind defending the eastern domain on behalf of High Heaven sect. Looking at the crowd in front of him who were on guard, Chu Xiu showed a smile on his face and said, "I say everyone, don't be so nervous. This time it is not only a threat to us, but it may also be an opportunity, a big opportunity. My Kunlun devil cult has been in the eastern domain for so long, and we can share the world with High Heaven sect and Imperial Sky Pavilion, but why can't we become the strongest? As long as we use the crisis properly, it can become an opportunity." Everyone was thinking about what Chu Xiu meant, but at this time, another lovesickness cicada flew in. Chu Xiu took out another lovesickness cicada and watched the two cicadas show off their love. This time the message was sent from Cold River City. 3 days ago the people of World Sword Sect had arrived at Cold River City, and now they were probably on their way. Chu Xiu looked around at everyone present and said in a deep voice, "Shrink the defense line and activate the spirit array. Old Wei, please take people to gather all the disciples in the lower realm. Except for some of the disciples who are guarding, bring the rest to the upper realm. Yuanji Chaoying, activate the rootless sacred fire array. If necessary, use the power of the rootless sacred fire to defend against the enemy." After a series of orders were issued, Mei Qinglian suddenly asked, "You don't seem to be doing this just for defense." Chu Xiu narrowed his eyes and said, "Of course it's not just for defense. As I said, this time is both a crisis and an opportunity. If we make good use of it and kill Yi Weikong, Cold River City will be ours, and the entire eastern domain will be ours." 3 days ago in Cold River City. When Fang Baidu teleported everyone to Cold River City with the secret method of shadow shifting and moon shifting, he almost passed out from exhaustion. He had only used this secret method for one person before, but this time he had to transfer hundreds of people. Even a martial immortal like him was almost exhausted by this kind of consumption. Fortunately, the plan of World Sword Sect was to launch a surprise attack with only a part of the elite martial artists to defeat the high-level combat power of the enemy, and then gather a large number of martial artists of the southern domain to launch a frontal attack. If the World Sword Sect wanted him to teleport everyone here, Fang Baidu would definitely not agree to it on the spot. Luo Shan looked at everyone present and said in a deep voice, "Everyone, let's not waste any more time. I hope that the next time we meet, the entire eastern domain will be in our hands." Everyone present nodded and began to leave in 3 different directions. Among them, Cold River City was the slowest, because Yi Weikong still needed to gather those disciples and directly mobilize the power of the entire Cold River City to attack the Kunlun devil cult. The target of Luo Shan and the others was the entire eastern domain, but Yi Weikong's target was only Chu Xiu. Long Longer released a few acacia cicadas at the side. Even Luo Feiheng admired her calm attitude. Previously, Luo Feiheng was still wondering how Long Longer was going to release the Gu insects. However, Long Longer released them so openly and no one noticed it. This surprised Luo Feiheng, and made him feel that he was crushed in terms of intelligence. In Long Longer's words, the best way to be a spy was not to think of yourself as a spy. Many people knew that she knew Gu. What was wrong with playing with cute little insects? Moreover, she was confident in her Gu. Even if a martial immortal got hold of her Gu insects, he would not be able to find any information from them. Luo Feiheng moved closer to Long Longer and asked, "I say I'm going to make a move later. Why do I still feel a little uncomfortable? To be honest, that old man Su Qinya is really nice to me. He even took out his secret dragon blood wine and let me drink it like water. Now that I'm going to stab him in the back, I really can't bear to do it." Long Longer stretched her body and lightly leaned on Luo Feiheng. She said, "Oh? Could it be that cult master Chu doesn't treat you well?" Luo Feiheng rolled his eyes and took the opportunity to hug Long Longer. She was fragrant and soft and it felt really good. Seeing that Long Longer didn't react, she said, "Of course Chu Xiu treats me well. In fact, in this world there are very few people who treat me well. You might not know, but back then, my clansmen, my blood relatives, wanted to exchange me for the protection of Shangshuang clan. They traded me like a commodity. It was Chu Xiu Mo Tianlin, and the others who saved me even though they were far weaker. Therefore, other than them, my teacher and foster father Mo Yezi in the Jisha Martial Arts Academy, no one else treats me well. Now that old man Su Qinya is so nice to me, I can't bear to see him like that. Speaking of which, don't you feel it? Long Longer smiled and said, Fang Baidu treats me as his only successor, so of course he treats me well. But I'm slightly stronger than you. Those people in moon-worshipping cult treat me well. Although Dong Huang Tai doesn't like me and often speaks coldly, if something happens to me he will definitely save me with all his might. High Priest and I are both Miao clansmen, and he treats me like a daughter. Cult Master not Cult Master Chu but Cult Master Yi. Although he rarely speaks, he has been paying attention to me since the day I became the Saintess, fearing that the goo of longevity in my body would break out. Therefore, I know that my roots are always in moon-worshipping cult. Moreover, Cult Master Chu saved my life, so I will definitely do what he asked me to do. Don't worry, don't be so conflicted. There are many things in this world that can't be perfect. It's not easy to live up to your own conscience. When the time comes, you can act according to the circumstances. Maybe the situation won't be as bad as you think? Before Luo Feiheng could say anything, she heard footsteps coming from outside the door. This made Luo Feiheng shut his mouth immediately. Fang Baidu pushed the door open and saw the two girls hugging each other. He didn't find it strange. It was normal for girls to be intimate with each other. Therefore he just coughed and said, "All right, let's stop chatting. The people in Cold River City are ready to take action. We have to set off. By the way, Ling take this. Only use it at the critical moment." As he said this, Fang Baidu stuffed a crescent jade object into Long Linger's hands. The texture was exquisite and white. It looked more like an accessory than a weapon. Fang Baidu said in a deep voice, "This is the inherited secret treasure of my Guyu lineage, the illusory moon wheel. It can pull oneself into the space. Unless the opponent can tear the space rule, they can't break it. If you attack, you can also trap your opponent within. The space inside is equivalent to a small secret realm, and it's sturdy." At this time Su Qinya also walked in. He handed a dragon scale to Luo Feiheng and said, "This is the secret dragon scale armor of my dragon-subduing divine general lineage. It is made from the scale of a real dragon. Activate it with your own blood, and it can turn into armor and attach to your body. As long as your blood is not used up, the armor will always exist. This battle will be very dangerous. If necessary, use these trump cards." Two of their disciples were killed by Chu Xiu. This was a lesson for them. Therefore, this time, just in case, they directly took out their trump cards and stuffed them into their hands. This was to prevent any accidents from happening to their new disciples. Luo Feiheng and Long Ling looked at each other with the items in their hands. There was a complicated look in their eyes. Chapter 1351. In the High Heaven sect, Fang Yinglong and the other two martial immortals were cultivating. After returning from the founding ceremony of the Kunlun Devil cult, they had been cultivating hard. In fact, the establishment of the Kunlun Devil cult had no impact on the current High Heaven sect. Instead, it was beneficial. The stronger Chu Xiu's strength was, the more he would become a target in the southern barbaric land, attracting more targets and buying time for High Heaven sect. Now, Fang Yinglong and the others were cultivating so eagerly because they had a feeling that the era of Great War was coming. Although Fang Yinglong was an 8th Heaven Martial Immortal, there was only a thin line between him and the peak 9th Heaven Martial Immortal. He only hoped that he could improve further before the era of Great War. Only then would he be qualified to ensure the inheritance of the High Heaven sect and compete with the other 3 territories. But at this moment, a disciple knocked on the door of their seclusion room. Fang Yinglong opened the door and said with some dissatisfaction, "Didn't I say not to disturb us during this time? What happened outside?" The disciple said in panic, "Sect Master, the World Sword sect is here." Fang Yinglong was taken aback, then quickly asked, "What about the Kunlun Devil cult? Have they already started fighting with the Kunlun Devil cult?" Fang Yinglong subconsciously thought that the World Sword sect was attacking from the southern barbaric land, so they had already started fighting with the Kunlun Devil cult. The disciple shook his head and said, "Sect Master, there's nothing to do with the Kunlun Devil cult. The World Sword sect used some unknown method to bypass the Kunlun Devil cult and appeared in the hinterland of the Eastern Territory. They are already approaching High Heaven City." "What? Are you sure it's the World Sword sect?" Fang Yinglong was shocked. The disciple nodded and said, "It's the World Sword sect. But there are only experts from the World Sword sect. No other disciples were found. There are less than 100 people in total. Fang Yinglong suddenly let out a long sigh. He was wrong. The era of Great War had already begun. Outside High Firmament City, all the disciples guarding outside had already retreated into High Firmament City. The light of the array had already enveloped the entire city. After the martial artists of the Sword Sect of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect left the Cold River City, they traveled in the air at their fastest speed. Finally, it took them a few days to reach the High Heaven City. Although it was inevitable that they would be discovered by High Heaven Sect cultivators stationed in other places along the way, it didn't matter. In just a few days, High Heaven Sect wouldn't be able to arrange anything. Looking at the majestic High Firmament City in front of him, Luo Shan suddenly said, "I haven't been to the eastern region for over 100 years. Sheng Jiyuan said, "It seems like Sect Master Luo has long been confident that one day, you will be able to take over the eastern region. At that time you can look at your own things however you want." Luo Shan shook his head and said, "No, it's because I'm too lazy to go out." Sheng Jiyuan was stunned. He did not expect Luo Shan to give such an answer. Luo Shan sighed deeply and said, "A swordsman is sharp. I was the same when I was young. With a sword in hand I was fearless. Now that I'm old, I have more things to worry about, so I'm not as sharp as before. The Eastern Territory is the obsession of the Sword Sect of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect. Since the war 500 years ago, which caused the strength of the Eastern Territory to decline greatly, my master has always wanted to break through the Eastern Territory and let the Sword Sect of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect cross over two territories. This is the obsession of the Sword Sect of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect, but it's not my obsession. The era of great battles has arrived. I didn't make it in time for the war 500 years ago, and I probably won't be able to make it in time for the prosperous or chaotic world 500 years later. What I can do is to lay the best foundation for the Sword Sect of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect in this era of great battles. Brother Sheng, your branch has been friends with the Under the Heaven Sword Sect for generations. If something happens to the Sword Sect of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect in the future, I'll have to trouble you to protect the lineage of the Under the Heaven Sword Sect." Before the war, Luo Shan said that these things would actually affect the morale of the troops and seemed very inauspicious. However, he said it so naturally. Of course, only Sheng Jiyuan heard it. While the two of them were talking, High Heaven City shone brightly and a door in the spirit array opened. Fang Yinglong, Qin Baiyuan, and Linghu Xianshan appeared together. Fang Yinglong said gloomily, "I really didn't expect that your Under the Heaven Sword Sect would have the ability to bypass the southern barbaric land and directly attack the hinterland of my High Heaven Sect. Although your southern territory sects have been eyeing my eastern territory for a long time, aren't you afraid that you won't be able to return with such a hasty operation this time? My High Heaven City isn't that easy to break through. Once the Kunlun Devil Cult, Imperial Sky Pavilion, and Cold River City get the news, they won't just sit back and watch my High Heaven Sect be broken through." Luo Shan shook his head and said to Qin Baiyuan, "Brother Qin, as early as 100 years ago, you and I have interacted the most. You should know my character. If I didn't have 100% certainty, do you think I would make a move? This sect leader of yours is a little too simple-minded." A trace of anger appeared on Fang Yinglong's face. Qin Baiyuan, who was beside him, pulled him back and said in a deep voice, "There is indeed something wrong with this matter. Only the people of the World Sword Sect, Battle God Sect and Great Thousand Sect are missing. As forces of the Southern Territory, once the Under the Heaven Sword Sect decided to attack the Eastern Territory, Battle God Sect and Great Thousand Sect had no reason to be absent. But now these two sects were nowhere to be seen. It was easy to imagine where they went." Luo Shan shook his head gently and said, "Forget it. At this time I won't hide it from you. My Under the Heaven Sword Sect is determined to win this battle and we are fully prepared. Battle God Sect and Great Thousand Sect have gone to Imperial Sky Pavilion. Now they can't take care of themselves. As for the Kunlun Devil Cult, Chushio has offended too many people. Naturally, someone will go and deal with him. As for Cold River City, he is the one who will go and deal with Chushio. If there is no insider, how can we suddenly appear in the Eastern Territory?" Fang Yinglong's face suddenly became gloomy. If he had known earlier, he would have directly killed Yi Weikong back then. Otherwise, he wouldn't have betrayed the entire Eastern domain. Luo Shan continued, "Among the 4 major sects of the Eastern Territory, 1 has rebelled and surrendered, and 3 have been surrounded. Is there any need to persist? If High Heaven Sect is willing to surrender and seal their cultivation, I will return your freedom after 50 years. Fang Yinglong was so angry that he laughed. Luo Shan, your Under the Heaven Sword sect wants to attack High Heaven sect with such a small number of people? Do you really think you can defeat my High Heaven sect? Following Fang Yinglong's words, the soaring heavens Wuji seal behind him rose from the city. Moreover, it began to change in mid-air and began to expand crazily. In the end, it had even expanded to the size of Soaring Heaven City, appearing extremely terrifying. Luo Shan chuckled, Soaring Heaven Seal? Hehe. The next moment, a ray of sword chi soared into the sky, as if dividing the world into two halves. An ancient sword floated in mid-air. That sword seemed to have fused with the world's sharpness. Through Heaven Sword. Fang Yinglong's heart sank. Of course he had heard of the Through Heaven Sword. However, the Soaring Heaven Seal was not necessarily inferior to the Through Heaven Sword. But the key problem was that he, an 8th Heaven Martial Immortal, was controlling the Soaring Heaven Seal, while Luo Shan, a 9th Heaven Martial Immortal, was controlling the Through Heaven Sword. This gap of one heaven was not something the cards in their hands could make up for. I will ask you one last time. Is your High Heaven sect going to surrender or not? Fang Yinglong laughed wildly. Surrender? 10,000 years ago and 10,000 years later, my High Heaven sect has never surrendered. As Fang Yinglong's voice fell, the Soaring Heaven Seal in his hand smashed down with a momentum that could shatter mountains and rivers. Luo Shan sighed softly and said indifferently, Do it. The Through Heaven Sword instantly slashed out 10,000 rays of light, tearing the sky and shattering the earth. Just as High Heaven sect and the Under the Heaven Sword sect began to fight, the Imperial Sky Pavilion and the War God sect and the Great Thousand sect also began to fight. Compared to High Heaven sect, the Imperial Sky Pavilion was in an even worse situation. They only discovered their opponents when they were at their doorstep. As a result, the Imperial Sky Pavilion's spirit array was destroyed by Tao Qinming of the Great Thousand sect. Only then did they start to fight back. They were facing 3 martial immortals, especially Mu Shenxiao, the War God sect's sect master. Zhong Qiushui was no match for them at all. If it were not for the few trump cards passed down in the Imperial Sky Pavilion, they would not have been able to hold on until now. In the end, Zhong Qiushui even used their Imperial Sky Pavilion's most precious treasure, the Imperial Heaven Sword, to barely repel the opponents. But Zhong Qiushui was almost exhausted. An elder walked up to Zhong Qiushui and whispered, Pavilion Master, we can't hold on any longer. Tao Qinming destroyed most of the spirit array, and the disciples of the Great Thousand sect are still breaking it. We can't even keep up with the speed at which they break it. If this goes on, once the spirit array is broken, we will really be annihilated. The Southern Territory's attack on the Eastern Territory is not just a matter of mine. Hurry up and ask the Kunlun Devil Cult and High Heaven sect for help. Zhong Qiushui smiled miserably. It's not as simple as you think. The War God sect and the Great Thousand sect were able to sneak in here and attack my Imperial Sky Pavilion. Where is the World Sword sect? The other party is coming for the entire eastern region, not for the Imperial Sky Pavilion, which is already in decline. I can guarantee that the High Heaven sect and the Kunlun Devil Cult have already started fighting. Then what should we do? Zhong Qiushui's eyes flashed fiercely. What should we do? Nothing. My Imperial Sky Pavilion has seen all kinds of storms, how can we fall here? Keep your spirits up, fight to the end, hold on to the end. If the High Heaven sect or the Kunlun Devil Cult win, they will naturally come to support us. If they don't come, the Eastern Territory will be defeated, and our Imperial Sky Pavilion will not be able to hold on alone. Over the years, our Imperial Sky Pavilion has had disciples who died in battle, but there has never been a coward who begged for mercy. As Zhong Qiushui's roar rang out, the momentum of the entire Imperial Sky Pavilion suddenly rose. Relying on their courage, they repelled another wave of attacks from the other side. However, even Zhong Qiushui himself didn't know how long this bravery could last. Chapter 1352. Zhong Qiushui's guess was wrong. The Kunlun Devil Cult hadn't fought with anyone at this time, because the speed of Cold River City was slow. Yi Weikong had made up his mind this time. He directly brought all the elite martial artists of Cold River City. There were thousands of people, so their speed would inevitably be slowed down. However, after entering the southern barbaric land, Yi Weikong felt that something was wrong. It was quiet, too quiet. Initially, they were prepared to charge straight in, penetrating through Chu Xiu's territory. But in the end, along the way, they didn't even meet a single resistance. The people from the Kunlun Demon sect had long retreated. Fang Baidu frowned and said, Looking at the traces in those strongholds, the people of the Kunlun devil cult should have long withdrawn, and they even withdrew in an orderly manner, without the slightest appearance of being in a hurry. But we just arrived at Cold River City a few days ago. Could it be that the news was leaked? City Lord Yi, could it be that there are spies of the Kunlun devil cult in your Cold River City? Fang Baidu was originally unwilling to deal with Chu Xiu, and he was forced to come. At this time, seeing that something was wrong, his tone of speech was naturally not so polite. Yi Weikong snorted coldly and said, "So what if the Kunlun devil cult knows in advance? In the face of absolute strength, what can they do? Setting up a formation trap and ambush? It's just a small trick. You too, since you have come to this step, don't think about being half-hearted. Now go all out and get rid of Chu Xiu." Fang Baidu and Su Tinya looked at each other and didn't say anything. Anyway, this battle was led by Yi Weikong. With him, an expert in the seventh heaven of martial immortal realm, it was not their turn to attack. The people of Cold River City pushed all the way to the headquarters of the Kunlun devil cult, but there was still no movement from the Kunlun devil cult. Yi Weikong frowned. Just as he was about to order the formation masters under the command of Cold River City to investigate the formation and break it first, in the next moment, countless flames soared into the sky in the surroundings. The white flames, which seemed to have no temperature, enveloped all the martial artists of Cold River City. The flames hung in the air and all the power of rules around them was blocked. This was the rootless sacred fire of the Kunlun devil cult. Combining the power of the formation of the upper and lower worlds, and the formation masters like Master Yuanji and Chao Ying, the Kunlun devil cult's application of the rootless sacred fire had actually surpassed that of 500 years ago. Yi Weikong, it seems that you haven't suffered enough at that time. You dare to come to trouble me. But this time you're bound to be unable to return. Chu Xiu and a group of martial artists from Kunlun demon cult appeared in front of the gate. They stood in formation, staring at the martial artists from Cold River City with stern eyes. Chu Xiu and a group of martial artists of the Kunlun devil cult all appeared in front of the gate. They were ready to fight, staring at the martial artists of Cold River City with stern eyes. Yi Weikong scolded, "What are you panicking for? So what if you are surrounded here? Kill Chu Xiu and destroy the Kunlun devil cult. Then you will naturally be able to get out." As the founder of the Cold River City, Yi Weikong's power and influence in the Cold River City was considerable. His words immediately stabilized the emotions of those martial artists of Cold River City present. Turning to look at Chu Xiu, Yi Weikong said coldly, "Suffer losses? Chu Xiu, your strength is indeed good, but it is a pity that you always think yourself infallible and play those shameful tricks." Chu Xiu said indifferently, "But it's precisely because of those schemes that can't be put on the table that you, Yi Weikong, only dare to come looking for trouble with me now with the help of the sword sect of the world. Borrowing the power? If you didn't borrow the power of the High Heaven sect last time, do you think the Daluotian would still have you, Chu Xiu, and the Kunlun devil cult? I'm also at fault. My fault is that I shouldn't have hesitated so much and should have killed you directly." A trace of intense hatred appeared on Yi Weikong's face as he said coldly, "All right, I've wasted enough time talking nonsense with you. I hope the High Heaven sect hasn't been destroyed after I kill you. I also want to see Fang Yinglong's expression in person and let him know how wrong his choice was." In the entire East Domain, besides Chu Xiu, Yi Weikong hated the High Heaven sect and Fang Yinglong the second most. He didn't hate Fang Yinglong for seriously injuring him. He only hated that Fang Yinglong didn't give him a chance to suppress the Cold River City, but now he recognized the status of the Kunlun devil cult. He just wanted to let Fang Yinglong know that if the High Heaven sect recognized the status of the Cold River City, perhaps there wouldn't be so many problems now. Get into formation and get ready to attack. After giving an order to the cultivators of the Cold River City, Yi Weikong tore off his brocade robe, revealing a silver-white armor. It was personally made by Meng Xinghao in the past. Since the situation in the Cold River City began to stabilize, except for the battles that decided the fate of the Cold River City, Yi Weikong hadn't worn this armor for a long time. Yi Weikong took a step forward, and his aura began to rise continuously until it reached the level of the 8th heavenly layer. This scene immediately caused Chu Xiu's expression to change slightly. This was a variable. Since Yi Weikong was seriously injured by Fang Yinglong, he hadn't appeared in the Jianghu. Not only Chu Xiu, but other cultivators also thought that Yi Weikong must be in seclusion to recuperate. Who would have thought that he could take this opportunity to step into the 8th heavenly layer of martial immortal? Chu Xiu now had the cultivation of the 3rd heavenly layer, but his combat power was between the 4th heavenly layer and the 6th heavenly layer. Yin Tuoyuo, who was able to threaten the 7th heavenly layer, died in his hands. The palace master of the Peacock Divine Palace, Su Hana, who had the cultivation of the 6th heavenly layer, was inferior to Chu Xiu in a head-on battle, apart from having a deeper foundation in power. So, now that a 7th heavenly layer cultivator had come, Chu Xiu also had the confidence to fight him. In the end, who would have thought that Yi Weikong would take the opportunity of recuperating to step into the 8th heavenly layer? This was a huge variable. The gap between the 8th heavenly layer, 3rd heavenly layer, and 5th heavenly layer was enough to make people despair in terms of power. Endless bone-chilling wind lingered around Yi Weikong, and the entire weather instantly darkened. The power of rules stirred the surrounding heaven and earth, causing the range of the formation to instantly change from the southern barbaric land, where the 4 seasons were summer, to the bone-chilling north. Of course, Yi Weikong could only affect the range of the formation. Outside the formation, due to the obstruction of the rootless sacred flame, even if Yi Weikong attacked with his full strength, there was no way to reverse the power of the rootless sacred flame with the power of rules. In mid-air, the endless ice storm in Yi Weikong's hand turned into a ferocious roaring ice dragon in his hand, and it roared towards Chu Xiu. Su Qinya, who was at the back, saw Yi Weikong attack. He also subconsciously prepared to attack, but he was stopped by Fang Baidu. Why are you in such a hurry to attack? There are still 2 martial immortal existences on Chu Xiu's side. Even if we attack, we may not be able to take them down. Let's wait and see who wins and who loses in the end before attacking. Su Qinya said in surprise, that's an 8th heaven martial immortal. Do you still think Chu Xiu can win? Fang Baidu shook his head and said, not necessarily. Anyway, I have a feeling of uneasiness when I attack this time. Maybe something will happen in the end. At that moment, Chu Xiu was directly facing Yi Weikong. The powerful force made his expression extremely grave. The 6 paths of reincarnation bracelet on Chu Xiu's right arm shone with a golden halo, and the 6 Saha wondrous light wheels were unleashed. The ice dragon was trapped in the 6 paths of reincarnation in midair, and the 6 paths of reincarnation kept grinding and killing it. Yi Weikong snorted coldly, it's just a small trick. As his voice fell, Yi Weikong grabbed the dragon's tail with one hand and pulled out an ice dragon spear from the dragon's tail. The dragon spear flickered with an ice blue color that resembled flowing water. It was illusory and magnificent. It was an existence completely condensed by the power of rules. The dragon spear stabbed out. It was just a simple stab and a flick, but it had already unleashed the essence of the spear technique to the extreme. It directly tore the 6 paths of reincarnation plate apart. Seeing that, Chu Xiu's heart sank. The difference between an existence at the 8th heaven martial immortal and him was not as simple as the difference in their foundation. Instead, their comprehension of the power of rules was no longer on the same level. Yi Weikong could already directly extract the power of rules and completely materialize it. This kind of control over the power of rules was obviously much higher than Chu Xiu's. The dragon spear swept over and smashed down towards Chu Xiu with a monstrous aura. The bone-piercing cold wind was mixed with endless murderous intent. In the next moment, Chu Xiu stepped into the air. His entire body was enveloped by pitch-black apocalyptic fire. The formation-breaking saber slashed out. The heaven-devouring saber momentum was like a huge black hole, devouring any power within it. Moreover, it was unknown when the apocalyptic fire had already been mixed in the saber momentum. It spread in the black hole like maggots attached to bones, coiling along the saber momentum towards the dragon spear. Ear-piercing explosions were heard continuously. The pure power of rules on the dragon spear was actually melted and extinguished by the apocalyptic fire. Moreover, the apocalyptic fire vaguely carried a different kind of power. Nirvana to the extreme was rebirth. In the coldness of death, there was a hint of vitality. In the endless Gangqi storm, a green seed bloomed. As the petals bloomed, a huge demonic shadow broke free from it. Creation heavenly demon. The demonic shadow, which seemed to cover the sky, opened its arms and wanted to envelop Yi Weikong. However, in the next moment, Yi Weikong stretched out his hand and waved. Countless icy sword auras appeared in the void. Each sword aura was the materialization of the power of rules. In an instant, the creation heavenly demon was riddled with holes. Yi Weikong frowned and looked at Chu Xiu. This isn't your power. Chu Xiu said calmly, what I can use is naturally my power. In fact, it could be said that the series of changes just now was not Chu Xiu's power. Because when he killed Yin Tuoyuo, he had learned the other party's extreme world annihilation flame. However, Chushio did not intend to control that kind of extreme power. Therefore, Chushio added some of the creation heavenly demon's creation power into it. The series of changes in power could be said to be infinitely close to divine power. Unfortunately, it still could not do anything to Yi Weikong's overwhelming power. Chapter 1353. In fact, Yi Weikong had never underestimated Chushio. Back then he had been tricked so badly by Chushio. If he really underestimated Chushio, he was actually looking down on himself. Although Yi Weikong had said that Chushio wasn't worth mentioning, he hadn't held back at all when he'd attacked. He'd used his full strength. But in the end he was still blocked by Chushio. He realized that he had underestimated Chushio. Chushio, no matter whose power you used today is a great calamity for you. You can't escape. If you surrender, I can guarantee that the subordinates of the Kunlun Devil cult will not be killed. But if you insist on being brave after I kill you, I will definitely slaughter the Kunlun Devil cult. Chushio's face revealed a sinister smile. Yi Weikong, sometimes being too confident is not a good thing. You want to slaughter the Kunlun Devil cult? I will slaughter your Cold River City right now. Everyone attack. Kill. Following Chushio's order, the people of the Kunlun Devil cult who were still in a stalemate immediately charged forward. With the current power of the Kunlun Devil cult, Cold River City was not a match for them if the high-end battle forces of both sides were not taken into account. Especially not long ago when Chushio annexed a large number of loose cultivators and small sects in the eastern region. Although these people's strength was not much, when they joined forces they were not weak. At least it would be very easy for them to take care of Cold River City. You're courting death. Yi Weikong's eyes revealed a horrifying murderous intent. He formed a seal with his hands and in that instant, the sky above distorted. The entire sky was frozen and turned into a huge mountain that smashed down. Divine ability Ice God Meteor. A martial immortal of the 8th heaven unleashed his divine ability with all his strength. The entire scene was like the end of the world. The iceberg, which looked like a floating continent, was aimed directly at the Kunlun Devil cult. The core of the formation was also within the Kunlun Devil cult. If something went wrong, the entire Kunlun Devil cult would be completely smashed by the enemy. On the other side, Chushio used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. His Dharma idol that was thousands of zhang tall was able to support the sky and earth, lifting up the huge ice mountain. Chushio immediately felt a wave of extreme power as soon as they came into contact, causing his body to immediately fall down. The ground beneath his feet trembled and cracked. At the same time, an extreme chill came from the ice mountain, freezing his limbs and body. This divine ability of yours is an existence that unleashes the pinnacle of power. Its power is indeed extraordinary. But can you withstand this power? Yi Weikong sneered and waved his hand. The boundless chill once again condensed into sword aura that filled the sky and attacked Chushio. Most of the martial artists who had fought with Chushio did not know much about Chushio. It was not because they looked down on Chushio, but because there were few witnesses to Chushio's previous achievements. Moreover, he improved too quickly and had too many things to show. When one thought that one truly understood Chushio, Chushio could once again show a trump card that one could not imagine. But Yi Weikong was different. Before Chushio became a martial immortal, he had already fought with Chushio. After being seriously injured by Chushio, he had been secretly gathering information about Chushio. Among the 3 divine abilities that Chushio had, the cross-shaped lotus seal was a secret technique that specialized in countering evil and strange things. It was useless against him. Clear sky reflecting shadow was something that could only be used when one was desperate. Chushio would not use it unless it was necessary. Even if he used it, Yi Weikong was confident that he could use his own strength to withstand it. Only the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth seemed to have no weaknesses. But in fact, as long as one's strength was strong enough, one could naturally suppress the opponent. The current scene was exactly the same as what he had envisioned. However, at the instant the sword aura filled the sky, the golden Buddha light around Chushio and the monstrous demonic aura appeared at the same time. Using the indestructible holy demon body, Chushio actually covered it with the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Countless chilling sword aura collided with the Dharma power enveloped by the indestructible holy demon body. Clanging sounds rang out, but it was ultimately unable to destroy it. Shatter. Chushio bellowed angrily and smashed his fist down. The iceberg above his head was completely shattered, turning into countless frost and snow that scattered. However, the power consumed by this punch was several times more than when he normally used the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth. Combining the cultivation technique and the divine ability was a manifestation of Chushio's extreme control of power. However, at the same time, the power consumed by combining the two was also extremely shocking. Chushio had no time to waste. After shattering the iceberg, Chushio blasted another punch at Yi Weikong. The powerful force bombarded the space and let out a violent explosion. In the face of this absolute power, it seemed as though time had stopped in an instant. However, at this moment Yi Weikong's lips curled into a strange smile. At the moment when Chushio's punch was about to hit him, his body strangely turned into snowflakes that danced in the air. It was not the form of earth energy, nor was it the form of the power of laws. It was as though he had dissipated between heaven and earth and turned into real snowflakes that fell naturally, causing Chushio's punch to miss. Even though Chushio's punch tore the entire space apart and crushed the power of laws, he still couldn't find Yi Weikong. The consumption of the indestructible holy demon body and the lawful embodiment of heaven and earth was too great. When Chushio's punch missed, he could only temporarily stop this state. However, on the other side, the frost and snow fell and Yi Weikong's figure strangely appeared from the frost and snow. It was as though he was supposed to be there all along. Looking at Chushio, Yi Weikong said calmly, "Chushio, this divine ability is something I've specially prepared for you. It's called Cold River Melting Snow. To be more precise, it's something I've prepared for your clear sky illuminating shadow. For that, I even made a trip to the former site of the Bliss Demon Palace to observe the traces left behind by your slash. The clear sky illuminating shadow slash is a divine ability of yours that has touched upon the pinnacle of the power of laws. No one can block it. Xan Jialua can't block it, and neither can Yen Beifeng. I'm stronger than them. Even if I can block it, I'll definitely be heavily injured. The cold river melting snow is able to truly disintegrate my body into countless snowflakes. No matter how powerful your slash is, can it slash through all the snowflakes?" Chushio didn't panic. Instead he revealed a smile. "City Lord Yi, you're an expert in the 8th heaven of martial immortal. You've schemed and schemed against a junior like me. You really think highly of me. Or perhaps you're afraid of me?" Yi Weikong said calmly, "Even a lion uses its full strength to capture a rabbit. I won't make the same mistake twice. Besides, you, Chushio, aren't a rabbit. You're a wild wolf, a ferocious wild wolf." Chushio wore a mysterious smile. "Wolves are cunning and ferocious by nature. Since you know I'm a wolf, shouldn't you be wary of me? Didn't you feel something was amiss on the way here? You've used the shadow-shifting moon secret technique of the Guyu's lineage to teleport into Cold River City. However, it's a bit too slow for you to come here from Cold River City. You've taken 7 days. I've prepared many things in this period of time." Hearing Chushio's words, Yi Weikong felt a chill in his heart. How did Chushio know that they had teleported here using the shadow-shifting moon secret technique? Moreover, even though Chushio was a primeval venerable, he knew Fang Baidu, who was also a primeval venerable, very well. How did he know that they had traveled for 7 days? For the other party to be so sure and so precise, either there was a traitor in the sword sect of the world, or there was a traitor in Cold River City. Before Yi Weikong could react, Chushio shouted in a low voice, "Elder Wei, lend me a hand." Wei Shia was fighting with Fang Baidu below. Fang Baidu and Su Qinya didn't really kill each other. They were still waiting to see the result of the battle. Hearing this, Shang Tianliang, Lu Jianghe, Lu Fengxian, and other experts whose strength had reached the half-step martial immortal level took action together and temporarily blocked Fang Baidu's attack with all their strength. At the same time, Wei Shuya formed a seal with his hands. His power poured into the rootless sacred flame like a monstrous flood. Almost in the blink of an eye, the rootless sacred flame was boiling. Although the rootless sacred flame could be controlled by a formation, it was only limited to making it appear in the outside world. It couldn't be used to attack. Only Wei Shuya, who had integrated a trace of the power of the rootless sacred flame, could truly mobilize the rootless sacred flame. Amidst the silver-white flames, which were suffused with golden light, were constantly boiling. Traces of fire were drawn out from it, like a large net, directly enveloping Yi Weikong in it. The rootless sacred flame was a divine object born between heaven and earth. Its power was unstoppable by human beings. At that moment, Yi Weikong realized that he couldn't even mobilize the power of laws anymore, because the threads formed by the rootless sacred fire had already severed the laws of the world around him. Yi Weikong, who was enveloped by the threads, felt like he was trapped on an isolated island, and he couldn't mobilize any power at all. This time, you won't be able to escape even if you turn into ashes, let alone turning into snow. As Chu Xiu's voice fell, he had already slashed out with the breaking formation in his hand. The blade light was like a full moon, shining for eternity. The glaring moonlight shrouded everyone, and even the people present could not help but squint their eyes at the dazzling light. The clouds parted and the moon shone brightly. The blade light seemed to be tearing Yi Weikong's body apart. In the next moment, Yi Weikong's cold river turns into snow was cast, turning into countless snowflakes that drifted in the air. However, because of the shackles of the rootless sacred flame, Yi Weikong wouldn't be able to escape even if he turned into ashes, let alone turning into snow. Some snowflakes hit the rootless sacred flame and were directly burned into ashes by the scorching power. The other snowflakes cracked under the power of the clear sky illuminating shadow. Although there wasn't a trace of blood, Chu Xiu could clearly feel that his vitality was dissipating under the clear sky illuminating shadow. After a while, the moon shadow's blade light completely dissipated. Chu Xiu's face was already pale. There was no longer any vitality in the space enveloped by the rootless sacred flame. Wei Shia also hurriedly withdrew the rootless sacred flame. This was his limit. It seemed that Yi Weikong's body and soul had been destroyed. However, Chu Xiu still frowned and didn't relax. You're tuning in to the Han Li's Wuxia Chronicles YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.